Cool. So that looks like that should be working. I've got messages coming in. What's going on here? Yeah, there we go. I can see myself on there. There's a little bit of a delay.
Yep.
So, gang, if you're checking in, hopefully you're checking in. I really appreciate your patience with me while we sorted out a couple little errors that we had going on here, or tech challenges. Most of you know that there's plenty of reasons why I don't work for NASA, and this is one of them for sure. So I want to welcome you to this masterclass for understanding lateral work. I'm really excited to be able to offer this to you in this way. Again, really sorry for the delay. For some reason, through this group, Facebook thought I've never done a live event before or a live video, so I had to go through a whole new process to get into it. Anyway, so for this masterclass, just want to take a couple minutes here and chat with you guys. Again, reiterate sort of how this is going to roll. So we've got our live lecture happening tonight, and then after the lecture is over tonight, we're going to, or this morning or this afternoon, depending on, I guess, where you're watching from. But after this live lecture is over, I'm going to post the link in the guide for the leg yield. That's going to give you access to the first video breakdown for the leg yield movement, or the leg yield module. And then next week we're going to have our Q&A on that. Now in the meantime, if you want to share your struggles, ask questions, things like that about the video or about the leg yield specifically, within that guide you'll be able to do that. And you can even, I think you should also be able to post some videos and things like that if you're looking for a little bit of coaching with that. So hopefully that'll work out. And then next week when we go live for that, we will be putting out a Zoom link that everybody will have access to. That link will be provided in this discussion group. So that's how you'll access that. That's how you'll be able to log into that Zoom meeting when we do that live. So the way that my lectures always work, I know several of you that have joined on with us today have been to my live lectures in the past. If you have any questions during this lecture, of course it's not like you can just chime in, raise your hand, reach out, shout out, but please feel free to submit your questions into the discussion here with the video. I've got a new friend, David Koss. He's sitting behind the camera on the couch here, and we've got Tyler Leary, our working student. She's also on the couch behind the camera here, and Tyler's going to be fielding the questions when they come up. What I'm going to try to do is at the end of each individual segment, that's when I'll be taking the questions. So feel free to put your questions in as they come up, but we've got different sections of this lecture where we're going to be talking about terms. We're going to be talking a little bit about anatomy, and then we're going to get into our movements. So at the end of my discussion of each of those sections, that's where I'll be able to take your questions to help solidify anything that may have been confusing or anything along those lines. So I'm just going to give a little check here and see. Oh, it looks like, I don't know if you guys are getting it, but there's captions that are popping up on my side of this, and it looks like we've got quite a few people in here. Let me know if the audio is working. Somebody, Mary, just posted, said that the video keeps getting interrupted, so I'm really sorry about that, Mary. Are you feeling it okay?
Yeah.
Tyler? Okay. So that may be it may be a challenge on your end there, Mary. I have no idea. Again, this is many reasons why I don't work for NASA. But so keep sending in your questions. Hello, Tracy from Ontario. Are you able to hear me well? Is everybody able to hear the audio on here? Okay, Shandon, audio sounds good. Allison, thank you. Okay, great. We've got lots of comments chiming in here. So that means that we've got lots of you with us live, and that's super exciting. So I'm really, really stoked about this masterclass, not just because this is one of my favorite lectures, but also for the broad reach that we have. We've got folks from all over the world that have signed on for this class, and I'm super stoked about that. So thank you all for your interest. Thank you for your time. And of course, this evening, thank you for your patience with this. And as I mentioned in one of the messages in the discussion group, feel free to give me your feedback if you've got other pieces that you'd like to see added to this, or if you have potential ideas for future masterclasses. Please feel free. Let me know so that we can maybe tweak things as we go to make it a better learning experience for you. That's what I'm all about. That's what this whole deal is about. So let's talk a little bit about lateral work, shall we? That's the whole reason why you guys are here. What we want to talk about first is a little bit of kind of terms, okay? So that we're all on the same page when we're talking about terms. And you can see I've got the white wall set up behind me here, and I'll try to make sure that my drawings are big enough that you can see them from your screen as we do it. I know Jenny said that she was able to link her computer to her TV, so she's seeing me massive, larger than life kind of deal. So that's awesome. Surely she'll be able to see great graphics there. So anyway, the first terms that we want to talk about when we're talking about our lateral work is I want to talk about our arena lines and our arena tracks. Now, I'm going to be talking about this primarily from a dressage perspective, and I know that a lot of you that are watching are not necessarily dressage riders as we would talk about it. Some of you come from a ranching background. Some of you are more Western trainers. Lots of jumpers have signed on for this. We've got folks from all across disciplines, and I think that's fantastic because the lateral work is really important for all of our horses for developing strength and that sort of thing. So I want to talk about these terms first, and again, a lot of them are going to be kind of dressage based terms, but I just want to put them out here so that everybody understands what we're talking about. Because one thing I find is that from one discipline to the next, it's pretty common to hear terms that differ. I had a discussion with a friend of mine, a Western foundation trainer, and we were talking about all the different ways that we talk about bend or the counter arc, or different ways that it gets called, whatever it happens to be. So I just want to start out by clarifying what some of these things are. So again, first thing we want to talk about is the arena lines and the arena tracks. So if we were, let's say we're in, are we in with? We're not in with that marker. So let's say we're in our arena, okay? Whether it's a dressage arena or whatever. If we were, so the purple line here is going to be my fence line, right? Or my perimeter line. The basic lines that we talk about riding would be center line. You can imagine where that goes, right? Our center line is going to come down the center of the arena, all right? Now, if you're out riding in a pasture, if you're out riding in a field, if you're, riding in a much larger space, you get to decide where a lot of these are if you're not confined by specific walls, okay? And that's fine, but what we want to really be sure of is that you define it, that it's not some random line somewhere that you're not able to track yourself on to see, am I actually tracking straight? I hope that makes sense. Now, when we're talking about, when we're referring to the videos for each individual video module and things like that, you'll hear me talk about center line. You'll hear me talk about quarter line. So our quarter lines would be fairly obvious, I think, but our quarter lines would be splitting our centers, our half arenas there, in half there. So dividing the arena up then into 4 individual pieces, okay? So if we're tracking, say we're tracking to the right around the arena and we ask you to come down a center line, you'd be coming down here, right? If you're tracking left or right, doesn't matter, but say here we're tracking to the left and we ask you to come down a quarter line, you're going to be coming down our far quarter line here as you're tracking around. Again, just explaining this for clarity so that everybody's on the same page. Now, we also talk about individual tracks that are separate from center line, quarter line, okay? When we talk about the outside track, I feel like most riders can understand what that means. The outside track would be the width of your horse on the fence, okay? Or on the exterior of the arena. That's your outside track. Now, growing up from a Western background, it seemed like anytime anybody said something about going to the inside, it was basically any space that wasn't the outside track, okay? Which makes sense, but when we talk about riding on the inside track, that doesn't mean any random place inside here. In fact, we're going to be pretty specific. So if our outside track is this width of our horse here on the fence, and I were to ride on the inside track, I would be just to the inside of that position, So if you were riding with a friend, you'd be banging your knees together as you're going down the wall. If you were to ride on what we'll call the third track, you'd be that third horse in here. Okay? If you can picture a group of riders moving in unison, all abreast, head to head as they go down the arena, let's say you've got 6 riders side by side. The rider along the wall would be rider number 1, they're on the first track. Rider number 2, second track. Third track, fourth track, fifth track, sixth track, whatever. You can make it up as deep as you want to go with it. We want to think about when we're talking about deviating from our tracks. We're going somewhere specific. We're planning where we're going. And we're able to keep track of that. If you're riding on the inside track or the second track at the start of the arena, and by the time you get to the end of the arena, you're 20 feet from the fence, you're not on the inside track anymore. So that's something that you want to really think about. This is about being able to be accurate and specific with your horse where you want to go. Okay? So that's the difference between our arena lines and our arena tracks. Okay? Sometimes, going back to the arena lines, sometimes you'll hear someone talk about a half school, and that would be a line across this way. Okay? You don't hear that term used very often, but it's an important one to know. It's an important one to think about. All right, so we'll talk also about our circle sizes. That's important when we get into our lateral work, specifically from a measurement and an angle perspective. Okay, when we talk about our circles, oftentimes with our lateral work, we're talking about a 10-meter circle, because for most of our horses, our lateral work properly operates on a 10-meter bend. Okay, those of us that aren't measuring in meters, that would be measured out in feet. So we'd be looking at a 10-meter circle, about 33 feet, right? 33 feet across. So 10 meters is going to be most often the circle that we're going to be talking about when we're circling, okay? Or when we talk about releasing to the circle. We're releasing to the circle that matches the bend of the lateral work that we're talking about, okay? Now, on our circles also, we could have different tracks. Can we still see the camera here? Yeah. Let's say I'm riding a circle. Maybe I'm riding, in this case, a 20-meter circle. Okay? My horse being on the track of that circle, I could ride my horse then to the inside track of that circle. All right? And I suppose if you wanted to call it that way, you could ride your horse to the outside track of that circle. You're just growing your circle larger. Okay? So when we talk about our tracks, it's not just in the arena space, it's also in relationship to the circles that we're making. Looking down here, I have notes made up so that I don't miss or skip anything. Now, we'll talk a little bit when we're riding our horse. We'll hear reference to inside and outside. And you're going to hear a ton of that in this lecture when we talk about our aids. That's something that I want to think about here also. If you're riding your horse on a circle, or an egg, as I'm more appropriately drawn. So here's our horse riding on the circle. I think when you look at it this way, it's pretty easy to understand inside aids, or the inside of the horse's body, or the inside of the bend, is anything that's going to happen on the inside of that circle. Okay? The outside aids, the outside body, the outside of the bend is anything that's going to be happening on the outside of that circle. Okay? Now, when you're going around the large arena, or when you're traveling, let's say, again, you're coming from a ranch, you're riding out in the fields, you're riding even on the trail, something like that. If your horse is perfectly straight, you get to decide what's inside and what's outside. Okay? If you're coming up into a bend in your arena, or on your trail, or in your field, it'll be more obvious what is inside and what is outside. But when you're tracking perfectly straight, you get to decide what that is. What we don't want to do is leave that up to our horse necessarily, because they're going to be looking back to us for what it is we're asking for. And if we don't have any idea, then now we're both lost, basically. So inside and outside, you're going to hear a ton of that when it comes to your seat, your legs, your reins, all of those things. One other thing we want to talk about is straight, so since we mentioned inside and outside. Straight, we want to talk about flexion, and we want to talk about bend. This is something I'm going to draw out for you on here as well. When we talk about flexion, for the sake of this lecture, for the sake of our lateral work, when we're talking about flexion, flexion happens in the head and neck. Okay? So we've got our horse here, his head and neck is bent. The head and neck bending one way or another, we'll refer to that as the flexion. Okay? So we can have left flexion, right flexion, inside flexion, outside flexion. We can talk about specifically pole flexion, and I've got skeleton here with me that I can show you a little bit about that when we get into that topic. We can talk about flexion in the rest of the neck as well. Flexion, for the sake of this discussion, is in the head and neck. Okay? Bend, on the other hand, is through the length of the body. Okay? We would say that the bend happens from nose to tail, essentially. One of my mentors, Ray Hunt, used to talk about getting the horse on your line from the first whisker in his nose to the last hair in his tail. He was talking about that horse in bend or in straightness, right, depending on that position. But he was talking about getting that horse into alignment. Now, a tricky part here, when we talk about our horse being straight, straight doesn't necessarily mean a perfectly straight line. If I were riding this horse here on about a 10-meter circle, and his body was matching the angle and the arc of my circle perfectly, we would say that he was straight on my circle. What we're meaning in that case is he's in alignment. His spine is in alignment with the circle that we're trying to ride. Okay? You could be straight in a very straight, linear sense, or you could be straight on the figure that you're riding. When we talk straightness, we're talking alignment in that sense. Any deviation from that, we would say the horse is not straight on your circle. The horse is not straight on your line, or he's not straight in the movement that you're asking for. Okay? I hope that's making sense to everybody. You can see, doing this live, there's lots of times that you may want to go back and check on things. So we're going to leave this video up that you can go back and review it if you need to, if you have a need for that. So we've talked about our arena lines, our arena tracks, our circle size. We've talked about the inside and the outside of the bend. We've talked here about the difference between bend, straightness, and flexion. All right. I'm going to take a minute here to see if we have any questions before we get into working with the skeleton. Tyler, are there anything that's popped up?
No, there's just the lights on the whiteboard. Someone's asking if we could play with.
Uh-oh, can we play with the lights on the whiteboard? Oh, boy.
There were lights on the whiteboard.
Well, the light's flashing up here, so I may even, let me see if yeah, that's not going to help anything if I change position. We'll try to tweak the lighting as we go here, and hopefully that can help us a little bit here. Oh yeah, we can twist that one a little bit, see what we get. Meh.
There's a question.
Oh, we have a question, okay.
When horse is not flexing correctly, why is this usually happening?
Oh boy, when a horse is not flexing correctly, why is this usually happening? That's a simple question with not such a simple answer, but going back again to the idea of flexion happening in the head and neck. So why would the horse not be flexing properly? The first thing that I would want to do would be to check my aids, and this is something that we're going to get into as we go. Oftentimes an incorrect flexion would be a deviation from what we might call a proper rein length or a proper connection with the bridle. Now that's going to be the simplest way to solve that if that's the challenge. Another reason that might come up for that would be that the horse simply doesn't understand. So we talk about shoulders bulging, or we talk about deviations in that way, or the horse is spooking at something and looking the other way or whatever. Maybe he's bracing and resistant to the bit left or right, that sort of thing. That's going to come down to an understanding of the aids on our horse's part. So the first thing we want to do is check our presentation of the aids, and then we want to also check our horse's understanding of the aids. That's going to be the two simplest ways to talk about adjusting flexion if the horse is not following it the way that we are asking them to. Now, another thing from there is we would want to look at anything physically. I see in the clinics that I teach, the horses that I work with, I see lots of challenges pop up where we've got physical issues that are plaguing the horse. Maybe a dental issue, maybe a TMJ issue, something chiropractic, things like that. That can also be a cause for a horse not flexing properly in the way that we're hoping for, or the way that we're asking for. So.
Someone's asking you to clarify that straightness on a circle means not falling in or out, correct?
Absolutely. Straightness on the circle definitely means not falling in or out. Straightness on the circle would mean following the line of that circle. And I'm glad that that question comes up, because I think it's important that we also talk, this is a deviation from my notes, but it should have been in there. I think it's important that we also talk about the 3 planes of balance with our horse, okay? And this is where dropping in, dropping out of the circle is something that'll come up. If we look at this horse that we have right here, we're talking about one plane of balance, and that's the lateral balance, right? So that refers to the question that we're talking about here, the horse falling in on the circle or falling out on the circle. So lateral balance is one of the first planes of balance when we're talking about this with our horses. The second plane of balance, I'm going to see if I have other marker colors that work in here for us. The other plane of balance that we would talk about would be longitudinal balance. Okay? Longitudinal balance is going to be our horse in length. Obviously, I'm not going to quit my day job and go try to be an artist or anything. But the longitudinal balance is the length of the horse's body. Where is the balance in that perspective? Is our balance to the forehand? Is our balance more to the haunches? Is our balance more even in the middle? That's what we're talking about when we talk about our longitudinal balance. Okay, so we've got lateral, the side bend, maybe we might call it, right, of the horse's body. We've got longitudinal, the length bend of the horse's body. And then another one that I see oftentimes overlooked is the vertical balance in our horse. Okay, that's if we've got our horse tracking straight, or I shouldn't say tracking straight. Wherever we're looking at our horse, it's how is that horse in stability-wise. Tyler's giggling, I think, at my drawing right there. That looks pretty awful. But if we're talking vertical balance, think about, you've likely heard somebody talk about a horse turning like a motorcycle, leaning and tipping over, right? That's the vertical balance that we're talking about. If our horse is straight in their vertical balance, that's what we're aiming for, rather than leaning one way or another. That tells us that they're basically in synchronicity with gravity, right? They're not working against gravity, more loading one side of the body or another to support themselves and keep from falling down. So again, our 3 planes of balance that are going to always be important to think about. Lateral balance, or the side bend balance, right? The longitudinal balance, the length of the body balance, and then the vertical balance. How upright is that horse in relationship to the ground, essentially?
Would flexion be considered suppleness?
Whoa, would flexion be considered suppleness? That's a really great question. Potentially. I suppose that depends on how we're asking for our flexion. You could have a horse in proper flexion that's not at all supple, right? The horse could be braced into that. So technically they're going to be 2 separate things. If we're asking for suppleness, we're going to certainly be aware of flexion. I hope that's a clear enough way of answering that question. So I would call them 2 separate things, but I would say that they are importantly linked within the body.
Can you have bend without flexion?
Can you have bend without flexion? I think that's a super awesome question too. I would say you can have flexion without bend, right? If the horse's body is more straight, but the neck is bending, flexing, right? You can have flexion in the neck and head without bend through the length of the body. But you cannot have proper bend without proper flexion. Okay, we think about it when we talk about the connection of the pole. We talk about the pole flexion as being the doorway to the rest of the spine. If that's going to be braced, there's going to be brace, there's going to be blockage through the rest of the body.
Do you ask for flexion first and then bend?
Oh, that's a good one. Do we ask for flexion first and then bend? And actually, gang, let me know if you can hear Tyler reading the question to me, so that everybody's aware of the question that's coming through. Otherwise, I can repeat it if we need to. So go back to that one.
Do you ask for flexion first and then bend?
Do we ask for flexion first and then bend? And I think that's going to be dependent on where you and your horse are in your current training. I do a lot of in-hand work where we'll talk about flexion first, okay? But if I'm asking for lateral movement, say I want shoulder in, I'm going to be assuming that flexion or the releasing of the joints and things like that in the way that we're talking about it here is already there, and then we're going to ask for the bend to come into that. So I'm going to say yes sometimes, not always, right? I would teach potentially flexion first to get access to the rest of the body, but the flexion and the bend are something that we're going to just always be aware of, and we're always going to be navigating, do we need more, do we need less in one place or another? That's probably a bad answer for that question because it's not a very clear answer, right? But I hope that's helpful.
One more. To get a young horse to balance better, is it best to keep on the circles?
To get a young horse to balance better, is it best to keep on the circles? Again, that's going to be a yes, maybe. Really, when we're talking about getting young horses to balance best, it's best to get out of the darned arena and go out into the world, right, and ride up and down hills and things like that. Your circles are going to be a place where you can help to find and regain balance. But when we're talking about helping young horses, or really helping any horses build better balance, we don't want to just stay fixed on a figure. We don't want to just say, okay, I'm only circling. But we also want to get out and use the body in different ways. And nobody educates balance in the body better than Mother Nature does. So if we were going to call a best practices to helping develop balance, I would say an awareness of all these things from the rider, and getting out in real territory is going to be the best way. The best way, in quotations there, because it's also going to be dependent on the horse specifically.
There's another one.
Okay, one more.
How do you define hyperflexion, meaning behind the vertical, correct flexion, and in front of the bit?
Okay, ask that one again. How do you define
Hyperflexion,
hyperflexion?
meaning behind the vertical. She put that in parentheses.
Okay.
Correct flexion, and being in front of the bit.
And in front of the bit. Okay, hyperflexion, correct flexion, and in front of the vertical, or behind the vertical, correct flexion, and in front of the bit. Okay, so in front of the bit, this is where, I'm so glad that this is coming up in this section of the discussion, because to me this is about semantics, right? And this is about where we're breaking down our words and our terms so that we understand what we're talking about. If we talk about the horse being in front of the bit, that can also be similar to what we'd talk about with a horse being in front of the leg, or even behind the bit or behind the leg. This is going to have more a feel to it, where you might feel that your horse is not giving you any regard, no matter where their head is positioned necessarily. Now there's above the bit and in front of the bit, okay? Above the bit is going to be a true, like an inversion of the horse. We talk about the horse coming upside down, and they would have a bit of a, this is going to be an exaggerated sketch here, but we talk about that horse coming up with that U-neck, right, and being above the bit, right? Some people refer to like good banana, bad banana, right? Where good banana, we're talking about the longitudinal flexion. Good banana is that rounded back, rounded neck. Bad banana would be that upside down idea right there, okay? Oftentimes a horse that works with the tension in the top line that this posture would provide, or something similar, you'll see quite a bit of an overdevelopment in the under neck muscle. There's a conformational term I don't think we hear as much anymore, but stag-necked, right? Or U-necked is another term. And these are just uses of the body, conformation or posture, that the horse has adapted based on potentially misunderstanding, or also any of those other deviations. Maybe there's something physical plaguing somewhere that's caused them to be that protective of their body. So that would be above the bit. That could also be referred to as in front of the bit. But I would say any time when your horse is kind of rushing ahead of you and pushing into the hands where you feel like, you know, he's not available for questioning. He's kind of in front of the bit at that point in the what we'd call the negative way. Hyperflexion behind the vertical. Hyperflexion is going to be a closing of the throat latch and a drawing back of the nose. We'll hear Charles DeCunfee talk all the time about the horse's nostrils being positioned ahead of the eyeballs. Okay, if we see that horse, when we talk about the behind the vertical is something that gets a lot of attention, where people have this obsession about a horse's nose being on the vertical when they're competing or when they're riding in a frame, because somebody said that the horse's nose, somebody said, horse's nose has to be on a vertical. Oftentimes when they're at that vertical, that's going to be drawing backwards and kind of closing of the throat latch in there. So we want to be mindful, the aim, even here, our position, the nostrils are in front of the eyeballs, okay? An obsession about a vertical position of the head is something that I think, as riders and trainers, we need to kind of throw that away. It's where is our horse in understanding? A way that I like to think about it is that when the body is unlocked, when the spine is released, when we have proper lateral and longitudinal bend, also of course the vertical, but specifically when we have a proper lateral and longitudinal bend, the head will hang where the head belongs, okay? Some horses have an easier time of coming behind the vertical based on the construction of their neck. We see some horses with really kind of tight throat latches, or clean throat latches, some people would call them, and they're super kind of bendy in the neck. It's a different thing if you put the horse's head there versus if the horse has a natural carriage to go there. A horse that's heavy on the forehand, a horse that's not really driving well from behind, not engaging from behind, will often have a tendency to come behind the vertical. So we see it a lot in young horses, or horses that aren't really strong in their carrying muscles. There's a tendency for them to come behind the vertical, and it's not, we see a lot of Facebook keyboard warriors attacking people for horses coming behind the vertical, when a lot of times we will see that happen from a horse that's naturally not strong enough to be carrying himself forward and through. So the correct place, if I'm understanding this question correctly, the correct place is when that top line is released and relaxed and the head hangs like, I think it was Charles DeCunfee who said that the head should hang like a chandelier at the end of the neck, right? Everything is relaxed and that's where the head goes, okay? I hope that that's a helpful answer for that question. Any other big questions come in there, Tyler? I'm unfortunately going to have to count how many questions we take with each piece. I want to answer everything I can, but I've been known in this lecture to go for 4 or 5 hours before with covering every question. I don't think you guys want to sit there long enough to listen to all that.
There's one more.
Okay.
Would you teach balance before bend and flexion or other way around? And by the way, they can hear me.
Perfect. Good. Would we teach balance before bend and flexion, or would we teach it the other way around? I would have to say that those things need to be taught together. When I'm focusing on riding, I was mentioning to a student today, I think about athletic relaxation as being the umbrella that encompasses everything. If we don't have that, we don't have anything worthwhile. Underneath that, we would say balance first, posture second, transportation third. Okay? The balance and the posture, or the balance and the bend in this case, they're going to be very appropriately linked. When we talk about correct bend, if we don't have correct bend, we're likely not going to have correct balance, and vice versa. So they're both important in their own right. It's especially if we have excessive flexion, right? If you've got a horse that's really flexing to the inside, their balance is going to be onto that inside shoulder as well. So that's something that we're going to want to be mindful of. I think that we need to understand them both individually, but we need to be aiming for them both together. So I hope that that's helpful. All right, so on that line, on that note, we want to talk a little bit about some anatomy, okay? So I want to talk more specifically about flexion in the poll, okay, since that's something that comes up quite often, and you're going to see it come up a lot in your lateral work and on your circles as well. So we've got my trusty steed, Janet, here. She's come to visit us. So when we talk about, you guys still see this? When we talk about pole flexion, specifically the pole is that bony lump at the top of the head that sits underneath the foretop. If you have flexion here, you have a serious health issue. Probably means you have a fracture. When we're talking about pole flexion, what we're really talking about is flexion between the skull and the first joint in the neck, the atlas, okay? We have the occiput, okay, the base of the skull, and we have the atlas. And our proper flexion in there, I'm going to try to position this so that you guys can see it well. When we're talking about that flexion, we're talking left to right, okay? Our horses also have a ton of, we'd call it the yes, right? But there's very little of the no articulation, okay, of the lateral left and right. Because basically the way these fit together in here, and because of these paracondylar processes in here that come under the wings of the atlas, there's limited mobility in there, all right? You'll hear me talk quite a bit. You'll hear lots of riders talk about that flexion basically being, if I was to take this to kind of the maximum, eyelashes to the left, eyelashes to the right. We don't have a lot of flexion in the horse's neck in this way, okay? What we tend to see in cases where there's more flexion than that, we tend to see flexion deeper in the neck, often at the base of the neck, at the shoulder. But what we want to be aware of is where's the flexion in every vertebra, right, or in between every vertebra. So pole flexion itself, in the way that we're referring to it here, the lateral flexion of the pole, is very, very limited, okay? And this is something I like to work with a lot on the ground and the bridle before we climb onto the horse's back, just to give them a point of reference and understanding so they know what this lateral flexion looks like. Now, when we focus, especially when we're focusing in hand, something that you may have noticed with your horses, or something that you will hopefully notice, is that when we achieve a releasing of the pole, okay? When I say releasing, I mean the horse is relaxing and allowing the mobility of the skull and the pole, okay? Between that skull and atlas, the atlanto-occipital joint. When the horse releases there, they will almost reflexively give you a length bend in the body, that longitudinal flexion or longitudinal balance that we talk about. Lateral flexion of the pole will often, as a reflex, give us longitudinal flexion through the length of the spine. Okay, so this is again where we talk about this is the doorway to the rest of the spine. If this is braced or tense or there's a restriction in here, it's going to also reflect farther back in the body. Okay, so that's that lateral flexion. Now, what about when we see our horses, and your horses, if you don't have a lot of experience with lateral work and you're just teaching this for the first time, you may see with your horses a crookedness, a head tilt in the pole. If you're already doing lateral work, your horse is already understanding it. You may also sometimes notice that crookedness in the pole. It's important to understand that the pole itself does not, you can see me trying to wiggle this, does not roll. Okay, so from this joint, the horse cannot drop the ears left or right. In fact, the only joint in the horse's neck that allows that rotation to happen is between the atlas and the axis, C1 and C2, the atlantoaxial joint. Here we get rolling, we get rotation that way. Okay, very little, almost we could say none, side to side because of the construction of that joint, but we get more roll in that. So if your horse is dropping in the ears to one side or another, that's going to be reflexive of flexion in that AA joint, the atlantoaxial joint. Okay, so when we're talking about pole flexion, if your horse is dropping an ear, if they're flexing in the AA joint, they will most often be braced in the AO joint, in the pole. Okay, so this is where it's really important when we're riding, whether you're riding a straight line, a circle, lateral work, anything like that, it's important to be aware of the elevation of our horse's ears. Whatever we're asking of our horse, we would aim to keep the ears level with whatever position we ask them to take. If they're unlevel, they're going to be bracing in the pole, and they're also going to be tighter, usually tighter in the shoulder that is associated to the lower ear. That's just another little side piece there for you to think about. So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about flexion in the pole and what tends to happen when we get an ear dropping to one side or another. It's important, I think, also to talk about flexion in the hind legs. Because we're talking about lateral work, we're going to be talking about the horse stepping under their body. Okay? We're going to be talking about the horse stepping toward center of their body, right? Their midline. Okay, if I'm talking about the hindquarters, when we're talking about our lateral work, our aim is to step the hind foot deeper under their center of mass, okay? Their center of weight, their center of gravity. We're stepping deeper underneath here, okay? Ultimately aiming for them to step under the center of the rider's seat as they're coming forward, right? So we want to feel that that hind leg is stepping underneath the body. If our horse steps too far, if they go with that hind leg out beyond, and often you'll see it happen that a horse will come this way, out beyond, that's not engagement of the hind leg, that's disengagement of the hind leg. So that's something really important to think about. We see this often in, imagine a one-rein stop. You've probably all experienced that or seen that at one point or another, where maybe somebody's horse is bolting or somebody gets scared and they bend the horse with the inside rein into a one-rein stop. They're disengaging the horse's hindquarters. When that happens, that hind leg is stepping beyond the center of mass, not toward the center of mass. Okay? we think about the hind legs as being the driver, okay, and we're going to talk about that here in a moment also. If I stray from that, Tyler, I'm going to hold you responsible to bring me back to that.
Okay.
We're talking about the hind leg stepping under the center of the mass so that it can carry the weight, okay? If the hind leg steps beyond the center of mass, it's no longer in a supportive place. I hope that makes sense. And that's where the disengaging of the hindquarters comes in. Another thing that we want to think about, a reason why this comes up as being really important. Let me grab another couple pieces of my skeleton for you. So here I have a horse's pelvis. Okay, now these are two separate horses, so there's not a perfect fit. We have the horse's pelvis and we have a horse's sacrum. This piece of the pelvis here we refer to as the wing of the iliac, right? The joint here where these two connect is the sacroiliac joint, the SI joint, okay? If our horse steps beyond their midline, too sharp, too fast, too often, we're going to end up straining that joint, okay? You've all likely heard of a hunter's bump, and one of the most common that I see causes of a hunter's bump is a strain of that hind leg stepping too deep under, which can be from the horse falling in the paddock or, you know, over hyperextending, you know, when they're galloping or something like that, or sitting into a sliding stop. There's lots of ways that a horse can strain that, but it will certainly strain if we have repeated over tracking of the hind leg under the body. One way that you can experiment with that yourself is if you're standing up facing forward, if you were to take your right foot and step it forward to your midline, you'll feel that you're hopefully, generally, pretty engaged and balanced. You could move off from there. If you take that leg, though, and reach it sideways across and try to stand there and hold that, you're going to feel tension in your low back, okay, just like what your horse is going to feel. You're now disengaged. It'd be real easy for somebody to tip you over at that point because you're not in a solid balance. So when we step too far, we're deviating from a horse's proper balance, okay? We're deviating from any good balance at all, and that's, in a sense, we could say that's what gives us control of the runaway horse or something like that. Well, there are times and places where we might ask for that. If you're riding up to the edge of the Grand Canyon and your horse is galloping away, disengage the damn hindquarters and we'll talk about it later, right? But if it's something that you're doing every 10 strides in the arena, disengaging the horse's hindquarters, you're overdoing it. You're overcooking it. It's one of those things from a foundation perspective we want to make sure that we can do in the event that it's necessary for safety's sake, but then we want to try not to do it if we can help it, okay? Because the way that spine works is there's very little roll this way, and specifically in that joint. When the hind leg steps too far under, it's going to cause that strain there. Okay, so just something to really be mindful of. When you're doing your lateral work, we talk about 3 tracks versus 4 tracks. And you hear the arguments about it all the time. And I would say generally 3 track is going to be safer for you in all cases. 4 track is fine so long as the body's in relative alignment. If you're going in a deeper 4 track and you're going with a lot of velocity or a lot of force, you're running the risk of really straining that because you're running the risk of the horse stepping beyond the midline and rolling through the pelvis in that case. And again, with that joint there, it's not designed to really do that. Okay, so we want to be careful of that because repeated use can just wear the body out in that way, which is also then putting the horse heavier on the forehand. And the idea of collection is that we bring the horse back off of the forehand, sitting them onto the haunches so they can better carry the rider forward. Okay? I hope that's making sense to everybody right there of why we would want to be really aware of how our horse is stepping. It's not life or death if you're walking in your lateral work, or even if you're doing a little bit of a trot in your lateral work and your horse goes a little too far, whatever, you can adjust that. Don't be afraid of that happening, but certainly be aware that you're not consistently, repeatedly, forcefully overdoing that. Okay.
Here's a quick question.
Quick question.
That relates to that.
Okay.
If mounted, how can you feel if it's stepping beyond center?
If mounted, how can you feel if it's stepping beyond center? That's something that you're going to need to learn to feel through your seat. If it's really stepping beyond center, you're going to feel that the balance is going to be tipping to the forehand. Otherwise, you want to feel that hind leg is stepping under your seat. When it's stepping appropriately, you'll feel that there's more of a push upward into your seat as they're walking. You'll feel that that hind leg is getting stronger. If they step far beyond it, you're not going to feel that strength step in there. And like I said, you'll feel the horse fall almost always onto the inside shoulder when they're doing that. So perfect. Good timing throwing that one in there. Okay, so we wanted to talk about now the role of your horse's legs. I think this is an important piece to understand. I'm going to draw my horse on a bend. We talk about the driving leg. Right. We're going to talk about the supporting leg. We're going to talk about the leading leg. We want to know what do each of our horse's legs do as we're going through normal work and as we're going through our lateral work. Okay. We often have an obsession of the inside hind leg. Okay. It's important. That we would consider to be the driving leg. Okay. The balancing leg, the engaging leg. Because as our horse is tracking, that hind leg is going to be the one naturally oriented to step deeper under that center of mass as our horse is walking forward. Okay? This is if we don't have negative deviations happening. Okay? In this case, our horse is just tracking straight on our circle, we'll say. All right. The inside hind leg, okay, so this is, if you're taking notes, we would talk about the inside hind leg is going to be the primary driver and the primary balancer, okay? When we're talking about, and we'll get into this also, the balancing diagonals. Make sure, Tyler, that I come back to that. Don't let me stray from that. The balancing diagonals. When we're learning how to ride, when we're learning how to post, we're taught rise and fall with the shoulder on the wall because you can see it, right? The hind leg, if you try to focus on that too soon, you're going to be hanging upside down underneath your horse's belly. We rise and fall with the shoulder on the wall. In the trot, our horses diagonalize their legs. So when we're rising and falling with the shoulder on the wall, it's the inside hind and the outside front. Okay? So this outside shoulder, we would say, is also a balancer. Okay? The balancing leg. We've got a balancing hind leg and a balancing shoulder. Okay? Now, that's appropriate at any gait, all right? And if we think about the footfall patterns in our regular gaits, our trotting gaits. I know we have some riders with gaited horses that have signed on for this lecture. The idea of balance applies the same. The idea of what the legs do as far as their roles will apply the same. I'm not going to go into all the individual gaits, simply because that's not my specialty and I would probably mess something up for you there. But what we're talking about as far as how the horse is moving through all the lateral work and what the job of the legs is, that's going to apply whether it's a gaited horse or a trotting horse. But when we're talking about our gaits, our walk we know is a 4-beat gait, right? The 4-beat lateral gait. The trot is a 2-beat diagonalized gait, right? And the canter is that 3-beat gait that still maintains the diagonal balancing legs. Okay, so let's say you're making a transition from trot to canter. In the trot, you've got your diagonal legs, your diagonal legs, your diagonal legs, your diagonal legs. That's your 2 beats. In the canter, the landing sequence is outside hind, diagonal pair, inside front. So really the only leg that changes from trot to canter in its function is the outside hind leg. It just speeds up and breaks apart from its diagonal partner. Okay? The balancing legs remain the same, should remain the same in the walk, in the trot, and in the canter. We often talk about the walk as being the hardest gait to ride and the easiest gait to ruin. And I think that one of the big reasons for that is that it's the only gait, the natural gait there, it's the only natural gait of this trotting horse that we're talking about that does not have the balancing diagonal diagonalized. They move separately. Okay? I think that's one of the big reasons why the walk can be the hardest to ride, the easiest to ruin. So, well, what the heck do the other legs do? Okay? The inside shoulder, or the inside foreleg, is a leading leg. It's supposed to be guiding the direction of the horse. Okay? Your horse is cantering on a right lead or a left lead, right? That's that shoulder that's guiding through there. When we talk about my horse is dropping their inside shoulder, what we really mean is he's now balancing on the inside shoulder. Okay? So I would argue your horse is on the wrong diagonal, right? When we talk about diagonals, again, we learn our diagonals when we're rising, and we talk about a rider being on the right diagonal or the left diagonal, or the right diagonal or the wrong diagonal. But very infrequently do we hear somebody talk about, is your horse on the right diagonal? Okay? And oftentimes a horse that's out of balance, they're not using their balancing diagonal appropriately. I would say that they've fallen to the wrong diagonal. Okay? When we talk about my horse is bulging through the outside shoulder, he feels like his outside shoulder wants to lead me away, wants to take me away. That's going to always be associated with the other shoulder carrying more weight. So again, he's not in the proper balance. Okay? When we talk about the outside hind leg, what's its job? Okay? The outside hind leg is a stabilizing leg. Okay? It's a stabilizing leg. The inside hind is a driver and a balancer. The outside hind is stabilizing. It's helping to keep everything on track. What we see when we talk about disengaging the horse's hindquarters, we see this inside hind step really deep underneath the horse, and we see the outside hind flinging out there in the next county. Okay? It's not stabilizing. It's not able to do its job if the inside hind is disengaging because of how that body works. That sends that hind leg clean out away from the body. It's not capable of stabilizing in that case. It needs to still be tracking forward underneath the horse's body as we go. Okay? So we want to think about that. It's easy to obsess, especially when we start talking about our lateral work. It's easy to obsess about the inside hind leg or the driving hind leg and lose our awareness of what all the other legs are doing also. Because the truth is, we're riding all 4 of them. We're not just riding one of those legs. Okay? So really important for us to think about what's the role of each of our legs. Again, the inside hind would be the primary driver and balancer. The outside hind is a stabilizing leg. The inside shoulder is the leading shoulder, or the inside front leg. And the outside front leg is a balancer. Okay? This changes when we talk about some of our lateral work. It also changes if we're talking about a horse that's crooked or falling down or out of balance or whatever. But in most cases, when the horse is straight, moving into the direction that they're organized, that's going to be the role of each of their legs. All right. So want to take a minute, see if we have any questions in there, and then we're going to talk about we're going to get started with talking about our leg yield. We're going to start going through our breakdown of each of our lateral movements.
Someone is asking you to please expand on the 2, 3, and 4 track and the difference between them.
Expand on 2, 3, and 4 track and the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, and I'm glad that you've asked me that. That's an important piece. So if we go back to the picture that we had in the beginning of the arena tracks, okay, when the horse is on the outside track, their body was straight along the rail or along the perimeter. If they were on the second track or the inside track, their body was on the just inset from that. If they were on the third track, they were just inset from that, and so on and so forth. When we apply this in our lateral work, I'm going to just use this horse here. When we apply this with our lateral work, if this horse was going, say, straight down a fence, right? So here's our fence. You see how the haunches are on what we would call the outside track, and the shoulders come into the inside track. This technically we're getting into shoulder in this case. So we have 1 track, 2 tracks, 3 tracks here if we're following the movement and the orientation of the horse's legs. So this is our 3-track movement. Sometimes, and this is where the terms are really important, sometimes we will hear people talk about 2-tracking a horse. That's going to get more into our leg yield where they're moving forward and diagonal, okay? Otherwise, if our horse was straight and the shoulders were aligned in front of the haunches, they would be moving on 2 tracks, but that's different than 2-tracking. It's semantics is what that comes down to. So this horse here, as we've drawn the lines, this horse would be traveling on 3 tracks. Outside hind on 1, inside hind with the outside front on the 2nd, and the inside front on its 3rd track there. If our horse was angled more inward, that the inside hind was not lined up with the outside front, think more sideways, then we're going to be seeing a deviation where each leg would be on its own track. So that's our 4 tracks in there. That's where we were talking. It's pretty easy if we're going through with a lot of power, a lot of force, or a lot of repetition. It's easy to overdo those 4 tracks and just start wearing the body out from the SI perspective, okay, the sacroiliac joint perspective.
Thinking of the in-hand work, position 1 and 2, and how we must be careful with how the horse is placing its hind leg. What is the problem if the horse is not stepping all the way to the center? Is it also bad for the sacroiliac joint, or is the horse simply not getting the full benefit of the exercise? How can we help if the horse step under closer to center line?
Okay, perfect. So that question sounds like it's coming from somebody who's worked with me in hand or is part of maybe the Developing Balance in Hand online program where we talk about position 1, position 2. Position 1 basically being a shoulder in on a small circle. Position 2 being a counter shoulder in on a small circle. So the idea of the horse, if the horse is not stepping that hind leg under the center of mass, is there a detriment to the body for that? I would say there's not a detriment. There's just not as much of a benefit as if the horse were stepping to the midline. How do we help the horse to step more to the midline? That's going to be more of the guidance with your stick, or with your whip, with your whatever your aid is that you're using to help talk to the hind leg specifically. It may also be that we need to slow the shoulders down a little more. Thinking slow the shoulders, speed the haunches as we're going. Being careful not, of course, to over track there. It may also be helpful to bring this in tiny doses. If a horse is maybe not necessarily strong enough to do that very well or very consistently, it's helpful to do that in small doses also to begin building that strength, and more importantly, to begin building the horse's confidence in stepping underneath that way. So if they're not stepping under, is that going to be a detriment to the body? No, that's not going to be harmful. It's just not going to be as helpful as if they were stepping to the midline. Yeah, fantastic question.
Talking of inside leg, can you explain shoulder fore and shoulder in? Not sure if this is appropriate now or for later.
We're going to be getting to that really quickly. Yeah.
I have heard recently that the horse should learn to lead with its outside front leg. Would you say that has any truth in it, or does the horse need to lead with the inside front only?
That's a tricky question. I would say from my perspective and from the way that I use these words, it would be easy for me to answer, but not knowing the intention of the person who's talking about this, talking about the horse should lead with the outside shoulder, I would question, are they talking all the time? Are we talking about, I don't know, maybe a reining horse or a rein cow horse doing a turnaround? What are we talking about when we say the horse is leading with that? I think I would need to know more about exactly what we're meaning by those words and in what situations if we're talking that the horse should be leading with the outside leg, because from my perspective and from the semantics that I'm using these words, the outside shoulder needs to be supporting and stabilizing so that the inside can reach up. Well, a great way to see this and to see that if this is happening properly or not is when we're riding our horse in the corner. Does your horse ride through the corner by dropping down into that inside shoulder, which is then going to be negatively affecting the vertical balance that we talked about earlier, that turning like a motorcycle? Or does your horse, we could say, stand up in the outside shoulder and reach through with the inside shoulder? Okay, so that's balancing or stabilizing even on the outside shoulder to be leading with the inside shoulder. I hope that that's helpful. Again, it's hard to make specific comments about what somebody else might be saying or what you might be hearing without really knowing the intention behind that and maybe what those other meanings might be. So that's why I'm so big on trying to really clarify what I mean by the words I'm using. I hope that that's helpful. I hope that didn't come across as more confusing for anybody.
So if my horse tends to drop the inside shoulder, how do I get him back on balanced diagonal legs?
Leg yield. Leg yield, leg yield, leg yield, and shoulder in. And we're going to be talking about that, both of those here pretty shortly.
If a horse is going actually straight in center of an arena, should a leg step under slightly with hind legs in walk, or are legs as table four corners?
Oh, as table legs and four corners. Yeah, I totally get that. So if and that's again a fantastic question. If our horse is tracking on a straight line, geometrically straight line, like as if we're coming down the center line, is the horse going to be tracking, stepping more with one hind leg or another, or should the horse be stepping, right, more with one hind leg or another? That's going to be a moment where we get to decide what is inside and what is outside, but we're hoping that those legs are tracking straight underneath the horse, as the question was, kind of like that table straight as we go. But it would be important to know before we get to the corner of the arena or the end of the arena, which direction are we going to head, because that's going to dictate which leg we're preparing to become that leg that steps deeper under the center of mass. That would be different if we're, say, in a shoulder in down the center line. But the question was about if the horse is, straight in the linear fashion. Yeah.
Should the horse have equal weight on all four legs?
I would say that ultimately our goal is that our horse is able to carry equal weight on all four legs. The idea of that being a reality for most horses, particularly at the beginning stage of their training, it's just not going to happen that way. And that's one of the reasons why it's important for us to be working our horses balanced in both directions so that we're not overdeveloping strength to one side or another. Again, ultimately, we want to feel like left and right leg carrying equal weight, whether it's front legs or hind legs. But the reality is that when we're doing that, if we're tracking forward, we're tracking straight, most horses are not going to necessarily have the balance and the strength to be able to do that. So while that might be a goal, that's certainly not going to be the reality for a lot of horses until they develop to a higher level of strength and balance. Yeah.
That's it for now.
Perfect. All right. Very good. So that's going to take us into leg yield. It's also going to take me into a sip of water. I'll just erase it here. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in and sticking with me, and thank you for all of your questions as we go. This is going to be great. This is an opportunity if you've organized to have a saddle there. I've got a little saddle stool here that I'm sitting on. If you've organized to have a saddle with you that you can sit on for part of this lecture, now would be the time to bust that out. Get ready with that, because when we start talking more specifically about the lateral moves, that's when we're going to be talking about our aids, and being in the saddle hopefully can help you to really clarify and kind of integrate these ideas into your body. Awkward moment when the whole world is staring at you drinking water, right? You guys can take a little...
Everyone look away.
Oh yeah, everyone look away. Talk amongst yourselves, a little break for a moment. Oftentimes in our live lectures, this is where we take like the 10-minute break or whatever, but I'm just going to roll right through. And of course, if you need to take a break, if you've been sitting here staring at me on your computer screen, first, I'm sorry. And second, the replay will be available for this for quite a while. So don't be afraid to step away, and you can come back to it later. You can always, review what you might have missed. And people have been asking a lot about how long is this video going to be up, and I got a little secret for you. You can download it if you want to. Totally feel free to do that. And just don't go like selling it to anybody, right? But yeah, if you guys are interested in downloading this video so that you can have it forever to look back on, and who knows, maybe in a year or two I'll have better information and I'll be a little smarter, and you'll be able to say, hey, you said this here, and now you know more. That would be great, right? I would love to have that be the case. All right, one more second, then we'll go. Have any other questions happen to pop up?
Nope.
Awesome. And we have quite a few people on here watching. It says we have almost 130 people watching live. That's awesome. That's almost half of you guys. Okay, so we're going to talk about leg yield. All right. When we're talking about leg yield, we want to talk about what's the purpose, what's the reason, right? The purpose of our leg yield is to help supple our horse. Leg yield will also help to relax the body and release tension. You'll hear a lot of trainers say that leg yield is like aspirin for the horse's back, right? It's really good for suppling and releasing tension, okay? The way that the leg yield works, we can operate it in two different ways. We can operate it with a straight body or with a bent body. I personally use it a ton on circles. Okay, I think it's a great way to help change the size of your circles as well as suppling your horse at the same time. So a question came up earlier about suppling, right? This is a great way to do that, okay? We can do it on our straight lines also. We want to be mindful of just how sideways we go, that we don't go too far with the hind leg stepping beyond midline because, well, we've already talked about why, because on that. Again, if we're walking, totally fine most of the time. But it's when we add, velocity and power, more weight to that it becomes an issue. So if I want to make sure that I'm not getting in the way of the camera here. If we have our straight horse, the leg yield is going to happen. We're going to say that this is our inside. And this is our outside. Okay. When we're asking for the leg yield, I'm going to explain the mechanics first, and then we're going to talk about our aids. The mechanics of the leg yield, the horse will move forward and sideways. Okay. I think about that as being almost like a staircase. If you were to look down at your horse, you would see that they're going at kind of a diagonal line. Okay? I think about it as a staircase in a sense. It's forward and over, and forward and over, and forward and over, and forward and over. I guess if you're looking from above, it might even be a zigzag, but when we draw it on the board, it looks a bit more like a staircase, right? Your horse is traveling forward and sideways. How much sideways? You get to dictate that. How much forward? You get to dictate that also, or you hope you do as the rider. The inside hind is going to be stepping forward and through, okay? The outside hind stepping open and through. That leading shoulder, the inside shoulder, stepping across. The outside shoulder stepping across. If we go sideways enough, this becomes more those 4 tracks that we were talking about. If we have more straightness with it, it becomes that 3 tracks that we were talking about. And I hope the way that I drew that out and described that earlier makes sense to you, because that's going to be really important for all of the lateral work as we go. So this is our leg yield, forward and sideways. Okay. Let's talk for a second about the leg yield on the circle, and then we'll talk about our aids. So on our circle, I'm going to draw kind of our circle lines ahead of our horse also. On our circle, a leg yield would basically expand the size of our circle. Okay. What I like about that is that if we're working from soft flexion and equal bend, it's like we're suppling and utilizing all the joints in the horse's body equally. Where with the straight leg yield, it can be pretty easy for the horse to brace in some places if they have that as a tendency. So it can sometimes be a little more challenging to work that out. That's why I love leg yielding from the circle. And it's much less likely to run into the challenge of over tracking when we're leg yielding from a circle, simply because of that natural bend that's already in the horse's body. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like or feel like. In both these cases, the inside hind leg maintains its job as the primary driver and balancer. All of the legs maintain the job that we talked about when we broke that down as the driver, the leader, the balancer, and the stabilizer. Okay. So now let's talk about your aids as we're going. So these horses are tracking to the right, and in this case, leg yielding left. Okay. We want to make sure that we break this down, because I don't want you to get into any trouble with your instructor. If you go to a coach and they call this same movement a right leg yield, right? There's 2 ways to say this. This is a leg yield left, or this is a right leg yield. What do we mean by that? The inside leg, we could say the horse is leg yielding off of the right leg. It gets a little tricky, and again, it's just semantics. A right leg yield is the same as a leg yield left. So be careful what side of the leg yield you put the word on, right? Because that's going to dictate what that looks like. Hope that didn't confuse anybody too much. But you may sometimes hear instructors use those interchangeably. What we want to think about is, for the most part, if you're tracking left or if you're tracking right, your leg yield would be expanding the size of your arena, right? So if you're or the size of your figure, whatever. If you're tracking right and you're asked for a leg yield, naturally that's going to be a leg yield to the left direction, opening your circle up. If you're tracking to the left or circling left and you're asked for a leg yield, it's going to be the left leg yield will be leg yielding right and opening your circle from there. When you are straight and you're asked for a leg yield, it's important to know, do I want to go left or right? Otherwise, it's the leg yield kind of, we could say, always grows from the inside out. Okay? So hopefully that makes sense. Now, when we talk about our aids, Okay, this is going to be really important and something that you'll start to notice a theme here. Okay, if we're sitting square, okay, and I'm going to try to face to the camera in a square fashion here, so I hope my alignment is good for you. We want to think about your inside leg is always going to be kind of hanging right underneath you. Outside leg always slightly back. Okay, maybe a couple inches behind, depending on the size of your horse's body or the length of your leg too. But we want to think that outside leg, if we're coming along here on our circle, remember what we said, the outside hind leg is a stabilizer. Your outside leg essentially talks to the stability of that horse's outside hind leg, okay, and helps to stabilize it. I think of it a lot of times like a guardrail going down the highway, right? It sets a limitation. It's not to say you're always pushing with it, but it sets a limitation. So your outside leg is back slightly, and your inside leg is hanging right underneath you, okay? Now, there's reasons for this, okay? This is going to help us to provide the stability within our seat to encourage the proper balancing diagonal, okay? It's going to help keep us balanced where we need to be over our seat bones, which we'll get into in a moment. Also, more from the structural perspective, your inside leg talks to more the thoracic sling, helps to lift the thoracic sling of the horse, where your outside leg helps to talk a little bit more to the abdominals in those moments, where we're stabilizing more from the haunches. So the inside leg, we could say, is an elevator. The outside leg is a collector, right? If we think about it in that perspective. There are, from a foundation perspective, from a cow horse perspective, sometimes from the reining perspective, there is a deviation in there because we're talking about moving haunches away and pushing shoulders through. I'm not going to say that that's wrong, okay, but those movements aren't necessarily asking for collection. They're asking more for agility in those instances. When we're talking about asking for collection and the way that we need the horse to be balanced, this is going to be where we're going to want our legs to be, okay? So I'm not, if you're used to riding in the other way, I'm not going to say that's wrong. I'm just going to say this is going to really help you in your lateral work to help the horse to organize better within their own body so that they can build the strength and the suppleness and that sort of thing that we're talking about. So again, inside leg hanging underneath you. So if you're sitting in your saddle at home watching this, just let your inside leg drop underneath you. Your outside leg, you may have to shift and shimmy around a little bit, but your outside leg is going to be slightly behind. Now, what about those seat bones? We hear people talk all the time about inside seat bone on, outside seat bone on, more weight to this seat bone, more weight to that seat bone. I think that gets too damn cerebral. I think that gets us too much in our head and we get to blocking that way. If we're sitting, what I want to think about is which hind leg, in this case, in the leg yield, is stepping deeper under the horse's body. Well, that'd be the inside hind leg, right? If I end up sitting into that inside seat bone, I'm going to be blocking that hind leg because I'm going to be blocking his ability to lift his rib cage, right? So I don't want to be sitting into that inside seat bone and pushing my horse sideways because it's going to drop the balance when we do that, and it's going to impede his ability to really step under in the way that we're looking for that can build power. What I also don't want to be doing is sitting too heavy in the outside seat bone because then I'm going to be blocking the movement from the body on that side. So when we talk about our aids, I want to talk about your intention more than your seat bones. If I'm thinking I'm coming forward and a leg yield left, I don't want to be over here to go over there, right? I want to think, guide my seat into the direction that I want to go, all right? May there be slightly more weight to one seat bone or another as we go into our lateral work? Yes, potentially, but I think of that as being more an effect of what we're doing, right, than the cause of the lateral work. If I shift my seat and my horse follows underneath me,
Can you move back slightly so that they can see your seat more? Or we can tilt the camera?
Oh, I don't know if I can maybe even... Oh, nope, can't lift this up. They want to see my seat more. I'll see if I can stand in the chair here. I'm going to hover. It's good for my jumping position, right? So, yeah, I'll try to do this without tipping my chair and dying. So I'm going to be leg yielding toward the left. So my intention through my body is going to be coming to the left. This is kind of exaggerating even here, but I'm thinking coming to the left as I go. Okay, I hope that's more helpful for everybody seeing what we're doing there. Again, inside leg hanging underneath us, outside leg hanging slightly back. Intention carrying us, in this case, to the left. Not thinking, put more weight in this seat bone or put more weight in that seat bone. Because if we do that, think about what the horse feels. If I'm guiding my seat across to the left in this case, if my horse follows perfectly with me, okay, here I am and here's my horse. If my horse follows perfectly with me, what change is he going to feel in my seat? He should feel like we're right there in unison, right? If my horse doesn't go, there's going to be a difference in the feel. And that's when maybe my whip or leg or whatever we're using can say, oops, there goes the light. That's where that can say, hey, step up underneath me a little bit more. Or remember, this is what needs to happen. And that can help encourage him to come underneath us better. So when we talk about deviating, we can only deviate to the degree that the horse can follow. Okay, that's going to be really important for us. Again, that's going to keep us from tipping and dropping and all of those things. Okay, what's happening with our reins? Our outside rein, think about what happens in these feet. That outside shoulder does what? Stabilizes. The inside shoulder does what? It leads. Okay, if I'm leg yielding out to the left, what we see a lot of times from riders that are struggling to get it to happen is they kind of open outward, right, with that outside rein. In our foundation program, some of our foundation programs, we see that exaggerated sit-in, open out kind of an idea. When that happens, when we do that with our rein, we're actually pulling the horse in that direction from their shoulder, causing that to be a leading shoulder. Okay, so our outside rein, to support the stability of that outside shoulder, outside front leg, is our outside rein should stay connected right underneath us. Okay, or not underneath us, but right in front of us, at the horse's shoulder. Okay, our inside rein, it's not that we're going to be opening in a big way, but our inside rein needs to kind of have that feel that it's allowing. It's opening slightly. There's times riders in clinics have heard me say often, hand me your inside rein, kind of opening that way. That's going to give freedom for that inside shoulder to confidently reach. If we take, and we see this happen all the time, if we take that inside rein and we draw it into the withers, we push it into the shoulder, it's going to oftentimes cause an increase of inside flexion, which is going to cause that shoulder to be more heavy. At the very least, it's going to block that shoulder, which is then going to cause it to become a weight a balancing shoulder, which again is not its job, right? Its job is to be leading. It almost feels completely backwards because it feels as though you're blocking the horse from going that way. You're not going to have the kind of contact that blocks the horse. What we're doing is, in this case, helping our horse to discriminate between the seat aids and the rein aids, right? Where the seat says, hey, let's go here, and the reins say, I'll stabilize you to maintain your bend, okay? I hope that that's making sense. We're working on fixing our lighting over here. Our lamp fell, and there we've got some better light back. We've got like a odd ball of light here, but I'll just not draw there if I can help it. Yeah, it'd be good. It'd be good. So again, going through the review here of the leg yield and then the aids for the leg yield. The purpose of the leg yield is suppleness. It's going to help with balance. Okay, when we're asking this from our horse, inside to outside, so we'd say that the horse in this case is moving away from the bend. Okay, His bend is going right, he's moving left, so he's moving away from the bend. All right. Our aids, your inside leg's hanging underneath you, your outside leg is slightly back. Your outside rein against the withers, your inside rein slightly open, and your intention is forward and sideways at the angle that you want your leg yield to be at. This is where having a destination is a really important thing to think about. If you're just starting leg yield with your horse, well, you're going to be lucky to go very far in any direction anyway, but you want to still be thinking, at what angle do I want to go? If your horse is more confident with it, I want to be more thinking, where do I want to land? Where's my destination in the leg yield? Okay, where do I want it to end? When we talk about our lateral movements, we want to always feel that there's a beginning, there's a flow, and there's an end of the movement. So if we're asking for our any of our lateral movements, I want to feel, when do I want to start? Can we flow there without interruption of the movement, of the cadence, of the balance? And when we get to where we're going, can we stop that and go forward or change or whatever, right? So there's a start, a flow, and a finish of all of our lateral movements. So that's our leg yield. And we had questions pop up in the leg yield here. And sorry if I seemed distracted while I was watching them adjust the light. Thank you guys for doing that.
Teaching a young horse to leg yield, is it best to teach them from the ground first?
Is it best to teach a young horse to leg yield from the ground first? I think all of the lateral work is easiest taught first from the ground. Okay, and this is something in our video, the video module that I'm going to make available as soon as this lecture is over. We're going to show you leg yielding with Tyler's horse from the ground, as well as I coach her from the saddle, and I show you from Nico, my Frisian. So we've got lots of different setups there that you can see how we would ask for, and then even how we would initiate the leg yield in there. But my thought is that all of the lateral work is easiest to teach from the ground first. David and I were talking about this yesterday. I think about this as being like calisthenics before going to the gym. We learn how to do a push-up before we learn how to do a bench press. We can help the horse understand how to use their body in the way that we want them to for this, whether it's for unlocking or for engaging or for whatever, any of the lateral movements, before they have to carry the weight of the rider. So it's less cumbersome, I think, for them that way. Do you have to start from the ground? No, absolutely not. We've got lots of riders that are absolutely capable of helping that horse to learn it first from the ground, from their back, and they can all learn it first from their back. My preference, just based on my experiences, I like to teach them first from the ground, and then I feel like most of the time they already understand it when you get to their back. Neither one's better or worse. That's just personal preference.
Aside from disengagement, is it safe to ask for lateral work in a young 4-year-old horse?
Yes. Yeah. Aside from disengagement, aside from over-engagement also, and it's how long are you going to be asking for it. Leg yield? Oh, I would do a ton of leg. I'd like to do a lot of leg yield anyway, but I don't think that there's an age limit necessarily on leg yield. Leg yield is a movement that I start on the first ride on a young horse, because if you're going to work a gait, if you're going to, for me, if you're going to pick your coffee up off the fence, if you're going to, whatever, anything like that you're going to do, there's likely going to be leg yield incorporated into that. Always with all of our lateral work, be mindful of how much, how fast, how hard, how soon, right? If we're doing anything in excess, obviously it's not good for any horse, but I don't think there is such a thing as too early from the physical perspective to talk about these things. It doesn't mean on our 4-year-old horse that if we haven't done a shoulder in, we initiate the shoulder in today, and next week we're going, 60 meters down the rail in a shoulder in. You're certainly not going to be doing that, because that's about developing strength and that sort of thing. But I don't think there's any time that's necessarily too early to begin having the conversation. Right?
To clarify, there's no flexion on a straight leg yield?
There would be very limited bend on the straight leg yield, and it would be bend that would be in there simply because of that stepping under and that guiding out. It would be very limited. When we talk about flexion, there would be a slight, if I were to draw the nose here, if I were to draw the head, there would be a slight inside flexion. Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question.
What is unique to the leg yield that differs from all other lateral movements? She's having a hard time remembering them all and what makes one different from another.
Absolutely. So what makes the leg yield different from the other lateral movements is that both ends of the horse are equally aiming for the sideways movement. Okay? Whereas in the other lateral work, we name the lateral movement by the part of the body that deviates from the track. Okay? So, and hopefully I'll be able to clarify this more, but just know at this point that the leg yield, both ends of the horse are equally tracking sideways as we go there.
How does the outside leg slightly back not be confused with asking for the canter?
The activity of the leg. Okay. The outside leg would be resting back, and basically I would say at all times, unless you're asking for that cow horse turn or that sort of thing. But the outside leg would always be slightly back. Whether or not that gets confused with canter would be about the activity of that leg. Okay, we're talking the leg is there. When we ask for canter, the leg becomes active in the asking process. Okay, I hope that's clear.
Would it help to carry your hands in the direction of the leg yield?
No. There. How's that for a simple answer? No, it's not helpful to carry your hands in the direction of the leg yield because it causes a deviation of the responsibility of the front legs. If a horse is really, really sticky and they're completely not understanding, there will be maybe a one-step moment where I'll talk to that front leg, in this case the front left leg, where I'll say, pick this up and step this out here, if they're really, really just stuck in that idea. Otherwise, even from a young stage, I try not to do that deviation. So I would talk about breaking down leg yield as foundation leg yield or connecting leg yield. Okay, our foundation leg yield is those moments, and it would be moments really. It wouldn't need to be more than moments for most horses. That's how I should say that. That you would open and individualize each leg in that idea. Once they've got a baseline understanding of that, keeping the reins connected in the way that we're talking is going to be really easy for them to understand. Because ultimately what happens, if the shoulders go too much, the haunches will begin to lag behind, right? And that's where we run into balance problems and things like that. And again, the idea is that in the leg yield, the haunches and the shoulders move equally together.
Should your eye focus be straight or in the direction of travel?
I'm always going to be thinking in the direction of my travel. Focusing, I guess you could say that that's two different things. In the leg yield, I'm certainly going to be aiming for wherever I want to land. If it's on my circle, I'm going to be focusing ahead and forward to the next track that I want to be on. If I'm coming, say, straight down the center line and leg yielding out to the outside corner or something like that, I'm going to be looking for the corner. I'm going to be looking where I'm headed. Yeah.
Does the inside leg tap the horse in rhythm or is it quiet?
That's going to depend. Does the inside leg tap the horse in rhythm or is it quiet? I'm always thinking the seat initiates, the leg motivates, the rein validates, and the whip mediates. Okay? So, and I should have mentioned that at the beginning also, so thank you for allowing that to come up or inspiring that to come up. So the seat initiates. The seat says, hey, let's go here, or hey, let's do this, right? The leg says, give me more. The rein says, yes, that's right, or no, not quite. And the whip says, hey, you forgot something. So if I go with my seat and my horse is resisting, I'm not going to add my leg because the leg says give me more, and I'm not going to ask for more resistance. Why would we want that, right? If I use my seat and the horse begins to soften and follow my seat, then if I want more, then that's when the leg will touch, and it will touch in time with the thrust phase of the inside hind leg. That's the only moment where we can ask that to come through with more energy, with more reach, with more speed, with anything like that. Okay, so when the horse is following the seat, that's when I'm going to touch with my leg. Now, at the very basic beginning foundation stages, when you're still teaching your horse, hey, this leg means move over here, this leg means move over there, that's when there's a little bit of a blending of this, but I'm still trying to always think about that thrust phase of the inside hind leg, because that's the only real time the horse can understand the leg anyway. Okay, that's an important piece to remember, is the horse can only understand the aids when they're given in time with the footfall.
Do you know why some classical trainers do not teach leg yield?
Well, I've had discussions with some of them that don't teach leg yield, that say that they don't like leg yield, say that they don't use leg yield. And what I find interesting is that I often have seen that they will do something that they will call something that's a leg yield. I'm being a little cheeky with this. I don't want to upset anybody, but a lot of times when we hear somebody say, I never do leg yield, I wouldn't ask for leg yield, a lot of what they do is really a leg yield, but they might be calling it something different. So it's semantics in there for some of that. Now, there is an idea of only going straight with that horse and deviating then into the lateral movements. Can I talk to that necessarily? I can't. I can't always say what or why somebody else is doing or not doing something. I find it helpful for me to use leg yield to supple the length of the horse's spine. That's all I'm going to say there. I'm not saying that those other horses that aren't used or aren't ridden in a technical leg yield, I'm not going to say that their spines aren't supple. I'm going to say I find it really helpful for me to supple the spine and to educate the horse about my aids when I do use a leg yield.
This person says, I was taught if I was turning horse to the left, I should use my right leg pressure. Should I be using my left leg back a little?
Read that one more time.
I was taught if I was turning a horse to the left, I should use my right leg pressure. Should I be using my left leg back a little?
Should I be using my left leg back a little? If I'm turning left, okay, I'm going to be tracking left, I still want my left leg underneath me, okay? I wouldn't want to use it back. The outside leg being back slightly and using that, that's going to help encourage that horse's outside hind leg to still be that stabilizing leg. So I think that's 100% okay. I'm all about that because it's going to keep, ideally, theoretically, it's going to keep the horse's haunches from fishtailing to the outside. So I'm totally okay with that. That's something that I think maybe needs a little bit of clarity too, is we hear riders talk about the horse bending around the inside leg. That doesn't always mean that we're pushing the horse with the inside leg to create the bend. It simply means that the bend through the horse's body wraps around the inside leg, as if the inside leg were kind of a center point of reference, like a fence post or something, and the horse is bending around that. It doesn't mean the fence post is bending the horse. It just means the horse is bending around the fence post. I hope that that's helpful and not more confusing.
A couple people are asking you to repeat your clarification of what the seat, leg, rein, and whip do.
Totally, absolutely. So the seat initiates. Okay, I'm going to actually write this out for you. The seat initiates. Another way of saying it is that the seat says let's go here or let's do this. And it does that through mild shifting, and the primary aid of the seat is going to be intention. Okay? Because our job is to stay centered over top of the center of our horse's spine. If I deviate off to the outside of my horse's spine, now I've messed up the balance, and I've also blocked movement. Okay? Likewise, if I deviate to the inside of the spine. So our job, I'm always trying to think of myself as being a center pole for the carousel horse, right? I don't want to be crooked, and I don't want to be too much shifted off one side or another, because that limits how the carousel horse is able to operate. So the seat initiates, the leg motivates. The leg motivates. The leg says, give me more. It can be more step, more speed, more energy, more reach, more whatever. The leg says, give me more. Okay? Seat initiates, leg motivates, the rein validates. The rein validates. If the horse bulges into the rein and the rein closes, the rein says, nah, not quite. But if the horse is moving along and the rein maintains a softness within the movement, the reins are saying, yep, that's right. Okay? So the reins say, yes, that's right, or no, not quite. The reins validate. Okay? The whip mediates. The whip mediates. In other words, the whip says, hey, you forgot something. So if I'm asking for, we'll go back to the leg yield. If I'm asking for a leg yield and the horse isn't following the seat and this inside hind leg isn't stepping deeper because of the work that we would have initiated on the ground, the horse will know that if I touch with the whip, they need to step that hind leg under deeper, right? So if I shift with my seat and they don't follow, the whip says, hey, you forgot to follow my seat. Let's talk to that hind leg. Okay? So the seat initiates, the leg motivates, the rein validates, and the whip mediates. I hope that makes sense.
That's it for now.
That's all the questions for now? Perfect. All right, so now we're going to talk about leg yield. All right? After another sip here. I'm getting a little dry. All right. You guys are awesome. These questions are fantastic. Okay, shoulder in. It's funny, David asked me to begin with before we started the lecture, do you stand for this whole thing? I said, well, yeah, usually. Then I bring the seat out and I'm sitting for the whole damn thing.
You're welcome.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of nice to hang out here with this. Okay, so shoulder in. I'm going to draw my horse. And now I'm going to draw the fence. Or the arena wall, or the perimeter, or the quarter line. Well, it wouldn't be the quarter line, but I'm going to draw a line of reference. Okay? When we're riding in a shoulder in, most of the time, our shoulder in is going to be the same angle as a 10-meter circle, or the same degree of bend as a 10-meter circle. If you could imagine me riding on a 10-meter circle here, it would go off of my whiteboard, obviously, if I had that in relation to the horse here. But as we're going in this shoulder in, remember what we said earlier, we name the lateral movement by the part of the body that deviates from the track. So what does that mean? In the shoulder in, then, it means the haunches dictate the track and the shoulders deviate from there. Okay? So we want to think about, what are the legs going to be doing? The inside hind leg is tracking forward and now under the body. Has come in, okay, to the second track. You'll remember the graphic that we were drawing when we were talking about first track, second track, third track, right? The outside shoulder comes inward to line up, essentially, with the inside hind leg, okay? The outside hind leg is on its own track. It's still heading down the track, just like the inside hind is. Okay? So you've got the outside hind on its own track, the inside hind and the outside shoulder lined up together, and the inside shoulder is on a track of its own. So there's our 3 tracks. Can we go 4 tracks? Can we deviate more? Yes. If we deviate more, let's say we're going real sideways, right? Let's say we're going real sideways here, and all 4 of those legs are on their own track, kind of going forward and sideways on their own track, all 4 legs deviating equally. Isn't that what we called a leg yield earlier? Right? I'm not saying all 4 track is inherently a leg yield, but if we go with enough bend in the body, we've taken that move from a shoulder in and turned it into a leg yield. So we want to be careful about that. Okay? And that's about the degree of forward and sideways reach of the legs. Okay? But so our shoulder in, the shoulders are deviating to the inside. Okay? The inside hind is tracking up with the outside front. Okay? Or is stepping toward the outside front, thereby stepping deeper under the mass. Okay? Deeper under the horse's body and under the weight. And the rider should feel that hind leg is pushing you a little bit more. You should feel a little bit more drive in that leg because it's landing and carrying more of the horse's body. The outside hind leg should still stabilize. Okay, so we don't want it fishtailing like what we talked about with the disengaging hindquarters piece. We don't want to feel that hind leg fishtailing out there. We want to feel that it's staying on its track. Okay. The purpose of our shoulder in, okay, is to strengthen the horse, specifically the inside hind leg. Okay. If you watch a horse go in shoulder in, when this inside hind leg lands under the horse, it lands under the weight, it's carrying more weight in the hock joint specifically. Okay. At the loading phase of that step in the shoulder in is where that hind leg is going to get the benefit. Okay, or that's where it's going to feel it the most, essentially. So think about it as we're going to the gym. If it was us, right? We're going to the gym and we're doing pistol squats or something. You're doing a leg press with one leg bearing more weight than the other leg. So you're going to be working that leg more. That makes shoulder in really great for helping to rebalance a horse, for helping to strengthen a weak hind leg, again specifically toward the hock joint. That really makes it great to work that balance. It also makes it really important that we work our horse in both directions so that we're working for the strength equally on both sides. When we do our shoulder in, we can do it with a little more of a length to the body, which is going to be aiming for suppleness and soft encouragement of the inside hind leg, which I think is always recommended at the beginning when you're first educating your horse for this. This is why I love teaching it in hand, because it's easier to get more of that stretch and that releasing of the top line with the slight stepping under the hind leg. When they begin to develop more strength, and then we come up more into, we'll call it a working frame or a collected frame, that's when they're going to be doing more strength building and less suppling in those moments, okay? You're still going to get some suppleness within that, but it's more going to be focused on strength building. So, thinking again about what are the jobs of the legs, it's all going to be the same. Primary driver and balancer is the inside hind. Balancing leg is the outside front. Inside front is still leading leg. Outside hind is still a stabilizer. Let's think about our aids. Where are your aids going to be? I'll come across in front of you again. First, I want to think about when we're riding anything with our horse. Your shoulders guide their shoulders. Your hips guide their hips. Okay? Where does this horse's hips head? They head straight down the track. So my hips are going to aim to stay straight down the track. Where do their shoulders go? In this case, it's slightly into the right. I'm going to come slightly into the right. Okay. Imagine if you're riding a 10-meter circle. Your body's going to be bent and aligned on the arc of that 10-meter circle. When we're starting our shoulder in, that's that first step of a 10-meter circle. Okay. So a way that I like to ask my horse the first time for that shoulder in, and frequently I ask it this way, is I'll start with a 10-meter circle. And then when I get back to the track, I'll take one more step on that 10-meter circle, and then I keep my hips on the outside track. So I deviate slightly, saying, I'm gonna hang here. I'm gonna stay on the track. I kind of joke about it that I want my horse to think I want a 10-meter circle, but think I'm not really sure of where I want it to happen. Okay, we get that first step, and then we carry it slightly down the track. Now, the first time we ask our horse of this, you might just get into that position and halt and say, yeah, hey, get used to standing, slightly offset. Or then maybe we'll go into one step or two steps, always trying to do just a little less than what they feel confident being able to do. Okay? Because if I push him to the edge of his confidence, now I've likely started to create tension or create an argument we could have avoided altogether in the first place. All right? Let's think about what our aids need to do. Your inside leg still stays directly underneath you. Your outside leg still stays slightly back. Because remember, that outside leg needs to help his outside hind leg to stay stable, potentially. I'm not saying you're pushing with that leg, but it would be there in case that outside hind begins to drift. Your inside leg is still saying energize, energize, energize as we can, right? The outside rein, his outside shoulder is still stabilizing. So guess what your outside rein's doing? It's still there to stabilize. Okay, it's not tight, it's not hard, it's there as a stable point of reference. And your inside rein is going to think about being slightly open. Again, I'm not saying open it way wide unless we're really exaggerating in a teaching moment, which you'll see us do. I have Tyler do that in the video for the module of our leg yield and our shoulder in. So you'll see that come in there as a deviation. But when we're thinking about that, we want to make sure that we're not blocking that shoulder. We see a lot of riders that will bring that inside rein into the horse's shoulder. And what does that give us? That gives us flexion without bend, and oftentimes causes that inside shoulder to become heavy. Okay? It also, a lot of times, has a tendency to cause a rider to drop their inside shoulder, okay, kind of toward that inside hand. So we want to think, my hips stay on the track, my shoulders slightly deviate. So again, if you're sitting on your saddle, kind of play that position. This is our shoulder in to the right. Question came up earlier about the shoulder in versus the shoulder fore. Shoulder fore would be with half of that bend. So we would have less deviation with the front and the back. If you're looking at a really good, solid, steady shoulder in coming toward you on the rail, there would be those three, it's kind of wonky for me to show this into the camera, but there'd be those three individual tracks. If you're looking at a shoulder fore coming toward you, you'll likely see all 4 feet without much length deviation. Okay?
Go along with that really quick. Someone's asking, is there a time when you would use a 4-track shoulder in, or would that just be a leg yield?
There can be times, there can be lots of times to use a 4-track shoulder in. Ask that question again in 1 second. I'm going to finish my thought about the shoulder fore, but you're right on with that. The shoulder fore, so shoulder in, we say, is based off of a 10-meter circle, right? It's the 10-meter bend. Shoulder fore is more gradual. It's actually based off of a 20-meter bend. Okay, so we would say it's half of the bend. Shoulder fore is going to be a great way to help a horse that has a tendency to be off balance naturally, and because it's less of a deviation, it also does mean it's less work for the inside hind leg. So you can ride in it for longer without having to worry about it, basically, which really, I think, helps to give the horse a better point of reference for where their balance needs to be. There's some horses, I joke, need to live in shoulder fore. If you ride a horse in shoulder in too long or too strong, you can make them pretty darn sore. Shoulder fore, I think you'd be hard pressed to do that. so long as you're working the horse balance to both sides. So let's go back to what that question was again.
So is there a time you would use a 4-track shoulder in versus a 3-track, or would you just use a leg yield?
Is there a time when you're going to use a 4-track shoulder in versus a 3-track, or does the 4-track just become a leg yield? The 4-track doesn't inherently become a leg yield. The 4-track becomes a leg yield when we get too much angle, that the horse is not stepping up and really balancing more to the haunches. If we get equal forward and sideways of all 4 legs, that's when we tend to get more of the leg yield. If we're on a 4-track, but the haunches are still guiding exactly where we're going, and the shoulders have come in from there, that's what will differentiate the 4-track shoulder in from the leg yield, is the stability of the haunches. Okay, when would be appropriate for me to do that? There might be moments where I might need to ask for that to really help the horse to understand my aids, or to emphasize my request, or in brief moments to say, step much stronger with this hind leg, or something like that. So we would kind of flow in and out of that as necessary. For me personally, I wouldn't want to live in the 4-track for the shoulder in, because as I mentioned earlier, I think as we start to add in the trot work, there's too much, to me, there's too much risk for overextension in there. So we may go there in a moment, but not stay there for very long. Hope that's helpful in that. And so I think we're at the place where we can open up our questions for the shoulder in. I want to also make one point here. When we talk about movement toward the bend or movement away from the bend, the shoulder in would be a movement where we would say the horse is moving away from the bend. He's, in this case, bending to the right, but traveling more to the deviation of left. So he's in the shoulder in, he's moving away from the direction of the bend.
There's just one other question.
Okay.
Is shoulder in just on straight lines, or can I do it on the circle?
Okay. Shoulder in can be on the straight lines and also on the circle. Shoulder in is, we would say, from an organizational perspective, much more challenging on the circle, because we've got to really keep everything together. It's easier for the horse to swing that outside hind leg away from the body when we're traveling on a circle than it is if we're on a straight line, say if we have the arena wall or something like that to help guide. That's going to be more challenging for us to do. I think it's very beneficial for the verification of the rider's aids and the verification of the horse following the rider's seat that we go that shoulder in on our circle right there. Particularly when we're working in hand, we do a lot of the shoulder in is kind of taught on the circle because it helps to kind of set that point of reference for the body there. So we do that in any case. When we're talking about counter shoulder in, I didn't mention it, but I think it's probably simple enough to understand. If my wall were here instead of over here, where did my eraser go? Here we go. I'm in a shoulder in right still, but if my wall is here, it means I'm probably tracking to the left. So when we say counter shoulder in, some riders might refer to it as a shoulder out. The hips are on the second track. The shoulders are deviating to the first track. All the aids are the same. Okay. It just so happens that we're in an opposite direction. There's a lot of times we'll do shoulder in to counter shoulder in on a figure 8. So this goes to that question of our circles, right? And can we do shoulder in on a circle? Shoulder in, counter shoulder in on a figure 8, I think is a really awesome exercise to do with our horse for more than anything else, for verification of our aids, so the horse can really understand that.
A couple more questions.
Perfect.
In shoulder in, your hips are forward down the track, your shoulders are turned into your bend. Where is your intention or focus?
My intention and my focus is going to be on where I'm landing, okay? And that's going to help my hips guide their hips, okay? So I'm going to be in here, thinking there, okay? If that makes sense.
So a shoulder in can be a 4-track, but not a shoulder 4. What is the difference?
The difference is the alignment. So I think this goes back, and please clarify and ask again or ask differently if I'm misunderstanding the question. The shoulder 4 is not considered 4 tracks, but the shoulder in can be considered 4 tracks if there's enough angle to it. The shoulder 4, those 4 feet line up, and they are technically traveling on individual tracks, but those tracks are so close together that there's not enough deviation to call it 4 individual tracks. That sounds really confusing, I know. I'll try to draw this over here. So the 4 tracks, can you see that well enough on there? That might be hard to see. But our 4 tracks of our shoulder 4, it's a limitation of the bend, okay? It's really fairly almost straight with just a slight angle inward, where our, if you can see this graphic over here, our 4 track shoulder in, where the shoulders deviate more, okay? That's why that becomes considered 4 tracks, because they're definitely 4 clear individual tracks, one for each foot. With the shoulder 4, it's just such a slight bend that it's more like you're still on those 2 tracks and the feet are just a little muddled in their traveling of that. I hope that makes sense. I know that can be a little bit of a tricky one without having the picture of it or the horse right in front of you.
I feel sometimes like my horse is not putting enough energy into lifting the inside front leg when doing shoulder in, and is instead dragging the leg forward. Should we ask for more energy to help with building strength in this leg?
The horse is dragging the inside front leg?
Yes.
In the shoulder in. That would tell me that they're carrying a little bit too much weight there. So I might be thinking about, as a corrective exercise, and this is me not seeing it, so please, if it doesn't work, just understand that I'm just making an idea based on the question and my understanding of it. But I think from there I would be playing with, can we leg yield and then create a shoulder in, okay, to get mobility, to get movement, to get suppleness, and then to get the engagement there. I hope that makes sense.
Please clarify where the rider's hips and shoulders are pointing in the shoulder in.
Perfect. So shoulder in, if I'm riding toward the camera, right, because that can be on the fence or down a center line or wherever. If I'm riding toward the camera, let's see if I can hike up here again. My hips are going to be facing toward my destination, okay? My shoulders are going to be slightly deviated toward the circle that I might be getting my horse ready to ask. I want slight deviation in. I'm not going to do too much, right? But I'm going to do slight deviation to the inside. So this would be my shoulder in to the right, okay? My shoulders articulate to the right as though I'm asking for a shoulder or for a circle to the right, but my hips stay on the track right there, okay?
Last one. Do you practice shoulder in at the canter?
Do you practice shoulder in at the canter? I do. Shoulder in at the canter, the deviation at the canter doesn't seem as much, it doesn't feel as much as what it will at the other gaits. The shoulder in I like also as a preparation for the canter transition, because the canter itself is the only naturally bent gait that the horse has. So playing the shoulder in really helps to solidify the balancing diagonal before we ask for that transition. Yes, you can ask for shoulder in the canter. Like I say, it just doesn't feel as dramatic of a shift because the canter is already naturally bent. Perfect. Any other questions with that? No? That's pretty good. All right. I'm going to take a sip of water, guys. So if there's any other questions that are like being typed, that'll give you guys a moment to bring those in. I hope that that's making sense. And I hope that it was easy enough for you to understand the difference between the shoulder in and the counter shoulder in. It's basically where the alignment goes in the body in relation to the part that deviates from the track.
Oh, someone's asking for a quick clarification on the last part. She understands where your hips and shoulders are, but she wants to know where your head and neck are.
My head and neck. So, as I mentioned earlier, David Koss is here. We're doing some jumping lessons for these couple days. And so it's all about really look where you're going. I oftentimes will tell our dressage riders in their lateral work, pretend that I've put a neck brace on you so that you can't turn your head more than you turn your shoulder. And that's to keep the alignment of that. I think that that's really helpful because what I find a lot of riders doing in the dressage is that they'll turn their head more and then they start kind of deviating getting a little bit wonky in their body. I want to be almost kind of just looking as if I'm following my shoulders with my head and riding down the track with my hips. I hope that that makes sense there. Yeah, I don't want to be too owly with my head, you know. One of the things I think I should talk about also with that is, again, that inside leg is forward underneath us, outside leg back, outside rein against the withers or shoulder, inside rein open. One of the biggest faults that we have for as riders in our shoulder in is that we try to push it to make it happen, specifically with our inside leg. If you look at comments on your dressage tests, one of the biggest faults that comes up in the shoulder in the leg yield, and in the circles is that the rider is collapsing their inside rib cage or dropping their inside shoulder. And I would say that that is most often caused by pushing too much with the inside leg. I want to fluff my leg, just like we were talking about, in time with the inside hind. Okay, my horse needs to feel the intention of my seat and feel the slight deviation that I go through there, but I'm not going to be pushing him sideways down the rail. Okay, it'll always happen. If you're sitting in your saddle at home right now, imagine you're pushing with your inside leg or your right leg, and what you'll feel is that that's going to contract you down into that side of your body. It's also going to heavier drive that seat bone down into the horse's back, which is going to block that inside hind leg from stepping more forward underneath your seat. Okay, so again, why I don't talk about seat bones too much is because I think we can get stuck in them. If I travel down here, what seat bone would technically be carrying maybe a little bit more weight, a little tiny bit, would be the outside, only in so much as I'm trying to free up space under my inside seat bone for my horse to be tracking underneath. Okay.
Is a side pass just a different way of saying leg yield?
Ooh boy. We're going to talk about side pass at the end. We're going to talk about side pass with half pass. And I'm going to make myself a note right now so that I don't forget that. Save that thought, save that question. We're going to get there. That's a really good question.
They want to know where your chair is from.
I have no idea. I have, I also have a saddle stool. Can't think of the name of it. I think the company is called Human Tool. They make a lot of really neat ergonomic therapeutic things. I take it, it's in the car with me all the time because I take it around teaching. It's basically like the seat of a saddle sitting on a ball. And so you can be stabilizing in it and you can talk about your seat. And I had intended to bring that up, but I didn't have a stool tall enough to sit it on that would be stable enough. This is, I don't know, it's shaped like a saddle seat. My wife thought it was funny that I'd never seen one before, and she said that they use them a lot in nail salons. I have no idea. Pretty sure she got it off Facebook Marketplace at one point or another. So, or Amazon. Yeah, you can get it off Amazon, I'm sure. I wouldn't even know what to call it. Sorry. That's all the questions? Okay, great. I love that question. That's great. Okay, so we talked about shoulder in. I'm sorry, we've talked about leg yield. We've talked about shoulder in. We talked about shoulder fore. We talked about counter shoulder in. Counter shoulder fore would be basically the same idea. So if you understood the difference between the shoulder fore and the counter shoulder fore, or shoulder out, then you would, or shoulder in, sorry, oh my gosh, I'm going to confuse the heck out of you guys. If you understood the difference, just erase the last like 35 seconds of what I just said. If you clearly understood the difference between shoulder in and counter shoulder in, you would understand pretty easily then the difference between shoulder 4 and counter shoulder 4. It's simply a change of bend. It's a deviation of bend, okay? Which is shoulder 4, really great for balancing and suppling, okay? Counter shoulder 4, same idea. All right, so now we're going to talk about haunches in, haunches out, also known as travers and renvers, okay? I'm going to start by drawing the fence again. And then I'm going to draw my horse from there. Okay, now, and again, if you guys printed your worksheets out, you have this, but so let's say I was continuing my 10-meter circle. Tyler just rolled her eyes. I think that means she didn't print out her worksheet. So let's say I'm riding a 10-meter circle here. We said our shoulder in happened one step onto a 10-meter circle and carried it down the rail. Our travers, or our haunches in, happens one step shy of finishing the 10-meter circle and carries it down the rail. I hope that makes sense. Shoulder in, we take one step on the circle and we carry down. Haunches in, we're continuing our circle and we're just short. One more step, if you can again imagine this is the fence. If we take one more step, my horse is going to be on the track, right? That I could carry him straight down. And then one step further from there, he'd be in a shoulder in position. So your haunches in, or your travers position, is one step shy of completing the 10-meter circle. And then we carry that down the track. Shoulder in, or haunches in, travers, renvers. This is where we start to deviate with the roll of our legs, okay? The horse's legs. So I want to really take the time to be clear about that. In travers, or in haunches in, the outside hind is lining up with the inside front. The outside hind is stepping toward the outside front, stepping deeper under the body. The inside hind leg is on a track of its own. Okay. And the outside shoulder is on a track of its own. Remember what we said when we talked about the shoulder in. We name the lateral maneuver, movement, by the part of the body that deviates from the track. So the shoulders maintain the track, the haunches come in. Okay? By the nature of the haunches coming to the inside, the outside hind leg is stepping deeper under the horse's body. Because it's stepping deeper under the horse's body, it becomes the leg that's carrying more of the balance now. So this creates the outside hind leg as being the primary balancer and the primary driver. Okay. Outside hind, inside front become those primary balancers. Okay. The inside hind leg is now a stabilizer. The outside shoulder becomes more the leading leg. The outside shoulder really tells the body how to go straight. The inside shoulder helps to keep the balance as it goes. The inside hind helps to support the body in the movement, and the outside hind does the pushing. In the haunches in, or travers, the stifle gets most of the work. Okay, we're talking about which joint does what, right? In the shoulder in, it's the hock. In the haunches in, the travers, it's the stifle. The hock in shoulder in catches the weight on the loading. The stifle in the haunches in catches the weight on the pushing. It's on the launching of that leg. or the driving of that leg, that the stifle takes more of the work. So hock on landing, stifle on pushing. Okay. And I reiterate these things because if you've got a horse that has hock arthritis, well, you're going to see some challenge here, but also motion is the lotion, right? Mobility is life. So we can help if we need to stimulate one joint over another. We can use our lateral work specifically to do that. Okay. If you've got a horse that's a little bit weak in the stifle, and let's face it, as riding horses, all of our horses are just weak in the back end. We're not strong enough, and that's what the idea of collection is. We work our horses to get stronger in the haunches so they can carry more weight back there, so they can be balanced and be collected. Collection is not just a face on the vertical. In fact, it's oftentimes the opposite of that. Because if we just focus on face on the vertical, most of our horses are going to drop to the forehand, and that's not collected, right? Collection, by definition, is that the horse is bearing more weight on the haunches than they are on the forehand under the weight of the rider. In this case, specifically, is how we're talking about it. So this changes the role and the responsibility of the legs, okay? The reason I talk about this so emphatically is that it changes how we operate the understanding then of our seat, okay? In the shoulder in and in the leg yield, I made sure that I got, in essence, I gave room to the leg that was stepping through, okay, which was the inside hind leg. In the haunches in or in the travers, we need to give room to the hind leg that's going to be stepping under, but now that's the outside hind leg, okay? So this is where riders can get a little wonky, a little wiggly, and this is what I think is great about this masterclass, that we've got weeks to work on this stuff. And again, the replay of this is going to be, I think, for a lot of folks, really helpful in checking in with it. So hopefully you're understanding what's taking place in the legs. The shoulders are staying on the track. The hips are deviating to the inside, okay? When we talk about the balancing diagonal, here's where it gets tricky, right? The balancing diagonal is now outside hind and inside front. Remember when we were talking about the circles and the shoulder in and the leg yield and the whole idea of learning how to post, rise and fall with the shoulder on the wall, because it's the outside shoulder and the inside hind leg that are primarily balancing, right? When we go to haunches in, we've now changed the balancing diagonal, okay? So one of the things that I like to play with, even when we're walking on a straight line, is I like to see, can I get my horse to change his diagonal? Which feet are balancing the load? Because that, to me, is a big key. Balance first, posture second, transportation third. If I'm walking my horse straight, don't look at the picture of the haunches in this moment. If I'm walking my horse straight down the fence or on a regular circle, it's his inside hind and his outside front that are the primary balancers. If I want to change to haunches in, I need to change the balance into the other legs. So before I try to change his position, I'm going to try to change his balance. And only once I feel like I can change that balance am I going to actually ask him to carry in that haunches in, okay? How do you feel the balance? That's going to take time and awareness of feeling which hind leg, which shoulder is carrying more weight as we go along, okay? Or carrying the balance as we go along. Again, we said ultimately we want each shoulder carrying equal weight. But to begin with, for most of our horses, that's not going to be the case. So the balancing diagonal is really important to be aware of, okay? If I have my horse going into haunches in, but he didn't change the balancing diagonal, it's not really haunches in, it's just a crooked horse. Just like if I go into shoulder in and he's not in the appropriate balance, if he's falling to the inside, he's just a crooked horse. He's not a horse in shoulder in, and therefore he's not going to get the benefit of the lateral movement. I hope that really makes sense. So when we talk about our aids, remember, our hips guide their hips, our shoulders guide their shoulders. If I want his shoulders on the track because the haunches are deviating, my shoulders are going to maintain a position on the track. I need his haunches to come to the inside. So what are my haunches going to do? My haunches, my hips, are going to think about drawing to the inside. Okay, a lot of riders, when we first start doing that, they'd start to tip forward a little bit. Make sure you don't tip forward. In fact, think rock back and haunches in. I tend to think about my outside hip carrying around through my inside knee, because again, that outside hind leg needs a little room to step through the body. Okay, so I'm going to encourage that, and it almost, in a very slight way, it draws a little more weight into my inside seat bone as my intention comes forward there, okay, to the inside. Where are your legs? Inside leg, right down underneath you. Outside leg, slightly back. Notice how that has never changed, okay? So inside leg underneath you, outside leg slightly back. The reins might be a little bit different, right? The outside rein, in the past movements, the outside rein was against the shoulder or against the withers as a way of helping to aid the stabilizing shoulder of the horse, or the stabilizing front leg. If the purpose of that rein, in this case, for the way that we're describing it, if the purpose of that rein is to stabilize the balancing shoulder, where's our inside rein going to be? It's going to be against the withers or against the shoulder to help aid and stabilize that balancing shoulder. Not pulling, never pulling. In fact, it's going to be there, but oftentimes it's going to be reaching a little and guiding. It's still encouraging that shoulder to step. We're not talking about restricting with our aids. We're talking about general placement, okay? The outside rein, the outside rein, talking to the outside shoulder. Remember, the inside shoulder in the leg yield, in the circle, was the leading leg, and so we kept a little bit of a leading feel, an opening feel of the inside rein. That's what we're going to be doing with the outside rein here, is that slight feel. I'm not saying open that up, right? Not full time. But I'm saying have that lighter feel right there, because if our horse is lagging behind with the haunches, you can open that outside rein one step. You can open that outside rein and you'll feel those hips deviate to the inside, okay? Because it helps more to free up that outside shoulder, and it helps more to tell that inside, the outside hind leg to load more weight and deviate more inward, okay? So, again, our shoulders, guiding their shoulders straight. Inside rein, aiding the stability of the inside shoulder. Outside rein, aiding the mobility of the outside hind leg and still allowing the freedom for that outside shoulder. Our hips deviate to the inside very slightly with their hips, okay? Thinking forward into your knee. That's how I like to think about it. Thinking forward into your knee, so that you're drawing the hind leg underneath you rather than trying to drive the hind leg underneath you. You can see even here as I talk about it, a fault there. If you're pushing too much with your outside leg to try to push and shove the body into position, you're going to be collapsing and leaning to the outside there, and then you're going to try to straighten your shoulders back up, and now you're all wonky and twisted up and wondering why your back hurts at the end of your ride, okay? You want to stay, again, that center pole for the carousel horse. Think about the stability of the aids, and think about the intention of those hips coming to the inside, even though your shoulders are tracking straight. That's hard, okay? Because as soon as we do that, our inside shoulder tends to lead. And then we're like, no, we got to bring that shoulder back. It's like you got to be able to do the twist in motion a little bit while you're riding, okay, and stay in that one little tweak position of the twist to encourage your horse to come into that. One of the primary deviations of our horses when we ask for haunches in, if you've tried to school this with your horse, if you do school this with your horse, you likely have felt, if you haven't done it yet, you will feel, I promise, when you ask for the haunches to come to the inside, the nose wants to go to the outside. The reason for that, remember what we talked about with the inside hind being the balancing leg on the circles and the leg yield and shoulder in. The horse's nose wants to draw toward the hind leg that's carrying more weight. Give that a moment to sink in. The horse's nose naturally wants to draw toward the hind leg that's bearing more weight. Think about your horse that's walking, relaxed, down the trail. And the nose is going a little left, a little right, a little left, a little right, a little left, a little right. And they move kind of like a little fish going down the trail, right? If you really think about what's happening in those moments, it's when the left hind foot lands on the ground, the nose draws left. The right hind foot lands on the ground, the nose draws to the right. The horse's nose wants to naturally deviate toward the hind leg that's bearing the most weight. Okay? That's what makes this movement so challenging for our horse. Because when we ask, in this case, the left hind leg to bear more weight, the horse's natural tendency for natural bend is to be to the left. And in this case, we're saying keep the bend to the right, but change your balance to the opposite diagonal. Okay? So we hear a lot of people talk about a counter bend with a horse. This is technically, in this case, a counterbalancing of our horse by changing the balancing diagonal. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to give you guys a moment to ask any questions that you might have. I'm going to take, again, a bit of a drink of water here. Tyler, are there any questions that popped up as we were going? No? Probably means everybody fell asleep watching.
No funny comments?
No funny comments? No poking fun? No, oh man. Not saying you guys have to make those.
Someone said it's a Belimo chair, and someone's dentist has a saddle seat like yours.
Oh, awesome.
We're just figuring out.
Yeah,
where
trying
the
to figure
chair's
out.
from.
There we go. There we go. So everybody's Googling and not even watching this lecture. No, I'm kidding.
Not a Belimo chair though. Balamo chair. Balamo chair is wall.
Ah, okay. Yeah, so to give everybody an understanding, understanding what this seat is, I could probably look underneath it. I bet there's a tag. That would be an easy way to do it.
Just saddle stool.
Just a saddle stool. Yeah, it's doesn't say, but it's distributed by Savvy Salon Furnishings. So totally check that place out.
Okay, here's a question. Is there any
The weird things I'm doing on the video. I told you I'm way too comfortable in front of these cameras.
Is there any position to change balance by changing position?
I have to think about that for a moment. Is there any position
To change balance
to change balance
by changing position?
by changing position? I don't understand the question. So if you can ask that question maybe in a different way or help clarify for me what that means. I don't think I am following that.
Someone else said, my horse consistently lags behind with the hindquarters when leg yielding. I'm constantly micromanaging in the hindquarters so they don't get left behind. Any suggestions? ? Is she just not strong enough?
Okay. So one of my suggestions for that, probably my primary suggestion for that, okay, I have two suggestions for that now that I'm thinking about it out loud. First is make sure that we are really clear with our aids, okay? Make sure that we're not over leading with the outside shoulder, right, that we're trying to stabilize. And I would sooner say slower is going to be better to really get the mindful movement in there, okay? So if she's lagging behind with the haunches, slow the shoulders down to match, okay? That's going to be the first thing. And then what I would probably do with that, it may be a strength thing, it may be a suppleness thing, it may be an understanding thing, right? What I would try to do with that is get the slow leg yield stepping in alignment and in balance. So again, think about what we were talking about. Balance first, posture second, transportation third. Get the slow, properly aligned movement, even if it's just a weight shift to start with, or one step to start with. And then I might trot out of that. I'm assuming we're talking about a leg yield at the walk. But I would trot out of that forward, and then come back to that in a minute after the horse has gone forward in the trot, and then I'll say, okay, let's walk again. Can we leg yield a couple steps? Super mindful. And then can we trot forward out of that? So the horse is, in a sense, anticipating the energy and the effort that's going to come on the other side of the leg yield, and that's going to help him to put more energy and effort into the leg yield itself. It's a pretty simple, really, I think, way of doing that, and it's much like if you're training a horse to work cattle. You never rush the turn. You get the turn really specific, and if you lose the cow, you might have to hurry up after. But you get accuracy first, and the speed will come. You get that turn to be specific, and then you might, again, have to hustle to go get the cow. Pretty quick, the horse learns that if they put a little hustle in the turn on their own, they don't have to hustle so much afterwards to get the cow. So you're kind of using the transition in there, basically, to help them become a little more motivated.
So if you have the outside rein slightly open and the tendency is to follow that, how do you keep them from moving that direction?
That's with the stability of the inside rein. Okay, and that's a fantastic question. So the reins are not restricting, but they're going to be helping. So we want to say, okay, you've got to be focusing this way. That inside rein is going to keep the proper flexion and the bend, and the outside rein is going to encourage, but it's not going to encourage more than what the inside rein can support. I hope that makes sense. And if that's the case, if we're running into that challenge with our horse, I'm going to slow it way down. I'm going to come back to the walk if we're trying to do more, or trying to do it in the trot or whatever. I'm going to come back to the walk, and I'm going to break it apart a step at a time. Okay, where we might make that circle and halt in that position, and then make that circle, come to that position, take one step and halt. Really breaking that down so that the horse develops confidence within that. And then releasing, we can either release straight forward, we can release to a circle, we can release across the diagonal, either way. But really kind of going back and building that slower, so that we know that the horse is truly understanding in their body what we're asking for them to do. And always keep in mind with all of our lateral work is the purpose is not to just contort the horse's body and move them sideways. You know, the purpose is for the physical development. If I go into the gym and I pick up a dumbbell and I'm swinging my arm around and swinging my body around to try to do a bicep curl, I'm not using my body in the right way. Am I getting that weight to come up into that position? Am I folding my elbow? Am I doing whatever? Yeah. But am I actually doing a bicep curl when I do that? No, I'm doing some wonky kind of a movement that my body can't benefit from, essentially. And in fact, it would end up breaking it down in other places as well. So always think the horse has to really understand clearly what it is we're asking for. So I will always go back to just slowing things down, take it more easy, so the horse is really understanding and really confident in what we're asking.
I think this is a clarification to the first question.
Okay.
She said, she's just saying, how do you practice changing balance?
How do you practice changing balance? That's a really great question. That's one of those things that seems really challenging. There's a thing in our brain-body connection, a phenomenon, stuff that happens in our brain and body connection that we refer to as the ideomotor response, which the gist of it basically means you can't think a thought without your body making a change. Carry that into the work with our horse. If I'm riding on a straight line, I want to just think inside hind to outside front, inside hind to outside front, inside hind to outside front, and that carries that intention. Sounds hippy-dippy woo-woo, I guess, I don't know. But you'll begin to feel that coming through with your horse, unless they're really terribly off balance and you need to help them. If you think outside hind to inside front, outside hind to inside front as they're walking, you will feel the balancing diagonal change. Okay? So again, it kind of comes down to intention to begin with, right? When we sit on top of a horse, we're plugged in, and in a sense, it becomes two nervous systems combined, right? That's one of our goals even, right, as looking for harmony and synchronicity and that sort of thing with our horse. It's that kind of combined awareness, in a sense. So the best way I would tell you to begin changing that is to just walk a straight line with your horse and really just feel, can I think about these feet? Can I think about these feet? And in a sense, you could also play a little leg yield to the right, leg yield to the left, leg yield to the right, leg yield to the left. And you get a horse to where you can hold them on the ready of a leg yield to one way or another. and that's going to be helping them to deviate and feel inside your body.
Do you want to talk about lateral walks?
Lateral walks? We can. Is there a way that you describe it or use it?
It's like because it's a diagonal pair, but you don't really want it to be a diagonal as a walk.
Right, right. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys were able to hear, but David was asking if I wanted to talk about lateral walks. A lateral walk, in the way that I'm understanding it, so correct me if you're thinking of it even maybe in a different way, a lateral walk becomes where the legs on the left side and the legs on the right side become more unified. So it becomes more of a pace, okay? For our gaited horse riders, we get pacey sometimes, right? And that can happen even in our regular horses. And you often see it in horses that are either really tense or get tense because of being held into kind of I want to say an artificial collected walk. And I would call it artificial because it doesn't have the relaxation. Are we kind of thinking on the same lines? Yeah. And that will cause, because of back tension, it will cause the both feet on the left to synchronize in the movement. So then it becomes a pace. They kind of walk like penguins a little bit. If you've ever ridden a pacing horse, it kind of feels like you're on a penguin waddling. And one of the ways that I love to fix a lateral walk is through leg yield, right? Just releasing the spine, helping to get that suppleness in there, and becoming aware of that balancing diagonal can be a way to really help with that too. Yeah, that's a great one to think about.
How can this be taught in hand?
The haunches in. Can be taught in hand in a couple different ways. My preference with it when I'm working in hand is I would be in the bridle at this point, and I would be on the outside, connecting what was the outside rein that now becomes the inside rein, right? So we'll say I'm on the left side of the horse's body. So there's me. I'm connecting my right rein a little bit more and feeling that draws the left hind leg under the horse. And then my left rein, as necessary, can open to encourage also that hind leg, but to help maintain the straightness of the travel. Now there are other programs out there. Straightness training, for instance, is one that teaches that movement from a cue with the handler on the inside. That's totally fine, okay? You can totally do it that way if you want to. I'm not going to teach you how to do that because they do a better job of teaching it. One of the things that I'm, again, going to reiterate is always focus first on the balance, okay? Regardless of how you do it, regardless of how you ask your horse to go around, focus on the balance. If they are deviating inward in this position, but they're stepping too heavy onto the forehand, they're not in haunches in, right? To be in haunches in, we want to feel more the weight drawing to the haunches. We want to make sure that we're feeling the appropriate balancing diagonal, and then we try to carry the movement from there. When you're first teaching it, they don't always load to the haunches, right? But a real goal is that when you're riding any of your lateral work, you want to feel that the balance improves, that the balance deviates more to the haunches each time you ask for that lateral work to happen. That's how we know that we're getting the benefit, basically, of that lateral work.
Can you demonstrate how to ride the diagonal at a walk and then change it?
That's such a subtle thing, demonstrating riding the diagonal at a walk. So I'm going to stand up for this. It's so much... David's crawling around on the floor now. That's kind of funny. If we could deviate the camera downward, we could show them. No, I'm kidding. If I were riding inside hind to outside front, I'm tracking right, it would feel a little bit right hip through left knee, right hip through left knee, my hip, my knee, or that inside hind to the outside shoulder and the inside hind to the outside shoulder. I wouldn't be actively doing this, right? I really want you to understand that when we're walking, I'm not actively doing this. I'm thinking about becoming aware of that feel in this kind of scooping way, okay? When I want to deviate that, then I'm going to think about now left hind to right front, and left hind to right front, and left hind to right front. But when I'm riding it, I'm not like scooping and swinging one way for 3-4 steps and the other way for 3-4 steps. I want to just think, in my awareness, can I feel it? Can I flow with it? Can I feel it? Can I flow with it? Can I feel it? Can I flow with it? Believe it or not, it's simpler than it sounds. It sounds airy-fairy. It sounds hippy-dippy woo-woo. It always surprises riders when I start introducing that to them, and they just kind of fall into it right off the bat. And if you don't feel it, don't worry about it. Just kind of play with it every ride. Touch on it, try to increase your awareness to it. Don't pressure yourself, okay? Because as soon as we start really forcing down and pressuring ourselves to find these things, we're going to mess it up every time. Just kind of flow with it, kind of feel it, and just be in it.
In counter-canter work, when we work towards having inside flexion, are we also working on having inside diagonal balance? I'm thinking we start with outside balance until they're stronger.
The question is counter-canter. I know you said that they can hear you, but for this one I'm going to repeat it just so that I'm more clear of it. When we ask in counter-canter, when we get to the point where in counter-canter to begin with, you follow what was the natural bend. So let's say you're tracking to the right, but you're on a left lead canter, right? You're going to naturally, to begin with, have a little bit more bend to the left. Ultimately, we get straight and then slight inside bend. The question was, do we aim to change the balancing diagonal? My answer is going to be no. We don't aim to change the balancing diagonal, because in the canter, the balancing diagonal is diagonalized. Changing the balancing diagonal in the canter is what we achieve when we get a flying change. A lot of times riders stress about what are the legs doing. If we think about changing their balancing diagonal, if they're capable of changing the balancing diagonal and they're understanding the aids, they will change their lead, okay? Because that's how the canter works. That's the organization of the legs. So we could say that our tempi changes is just constant, every stride, changes of the balancing diagonal. Okay, so a fantastic question, and I hope that's a helpful answer for you.
Do you do the whole long side or just some strides when doing lateral moves? Same on circle, whole circle, or just some strides?
That's a perfect question, and that's going to depend on the fitness level, the skill level, and the fitness level of the horse. When we first start out with our lateral work, it might just be one step. It might even just be a balance shift. As we build up to it, we'd like to be able to carry around any position or any deviation from one position to the next for pretty much as long as we want. It's always going to be reliant on the horse's level of fitness. If we go too long, too far, too much, too hard, we're going to wear him out. We run the risk of really getting one sore if we're too obsessively focused on one movement or on all lateral work within it. So that's something really important to think about, is that when you start with your lateral work, so let's say you haven't asked your horse for any lateral work yet. You're not going to go out in your ride tomorrow and say, okay, now all we're focusing on is all these lateral moves. Oh, no way. Absolutely not. Your horse is going to hate me for that, right? You would touch base for a step or two, maybe in the leg yield, maybe in the shoulder in. When we're talking about haunches in, don't let me forget to talk about haunches out for Ron Bear. But when we're talking about haunches in, that's a more advanced idea for a horse. So that's something that I save that until the horse is really pretty confident with the leg yield, with the shoulder in, with deviating that way, with changing from shoulder in one way to shoulder in the other. Then we'll start talking about haunches in. You can initiate the conversation, but it's a more advanced conversation because it's a counterbalance conversation. And a lot of our young horses, or a lot of horses that aren't particularly strong in their balance, will travel a little bit with the haunches to the inside, especially in the canter. So this would be something that I would be careful of introducing too soon. I would make sure that I really had a a solid feel of the horse's alignment before I would start going into that. But talking again to how far, how much, when you're first teaching it, I give as a very general example, if we're initiating a shoulder in with our horse, say you're in a regular dressage arena, when we first start introducing that shoulder in, it might be 1 or 2 steps. It might be at least a year before you go the full long side in a shoulder in and expect that horse to carry that balance. Not to say you couldn't do it sooner, right? But really give your horse the time, because if you push too much, then you're just going to strain things, and you're going to cause a lot of tension emotionally within that as well.
Do you feel you have issues keeping yourself balanced on your own horses? And what do you do to try to fix this in the saddle?
Do I feel that I have issues keeping myself balanced on my own horses? I don't know if that means versus other horses or just balance in general.
I think balance in general,
Balance
and I
in
think the question is, what do you do to try and fix this in the saddle if you have balance issues?
If you have balance issues. Honestly, if you as the rider have balance issues, the first thing I would recommend is going back to the lunge line lessons. That's something that I think is often underutilized and undervalued, and it's one of the most valuable things that we can do as a rider, is to take lessons on the lunge so that we can focus on ourselves, so that we can focus on that development more than having to worry about our horse. So if we've got a rider that's struggling with the balance there, we're gonna talk more about just seat development in those moments, much less about lateral work, much more about seat development in those moments. And then another thing that I think about is, when we're talking about balance that way, when we're talking about the skills as a rider, there's a lot of skills as a rider that we can develop without even being on the horse, because we're talking about things like tone, suppleness, flexibility, balance. Those are all things that you can learn through yoga, Pilates, strength building, lots of things that aren't necessarily horse, that will help to develop those things for you as a rider.
When you teach haunches in and hand, do you use a whip to move the hind out, or does it happen naturally when you flex the neck?
It happens naturally. That doesn't mean that I won't sometimes find a need or a reason to encourage with the whip, but when we've done enough unlocking of the body and we connect the bridle in hand, haunches in honestly happens organically. It's really very, very natural, very smooth for the horse to transition into that.
Why are jumping horses taught to do changes at a young age?
It's a change of balance.
Haunches in seems to be something that is going to help with canter work? ?
I'm going to say no. I'm going to say be careful of that. I'm going to say focus more on shoulder in, because one of the natural deviations in the canter is for the haunches to fall to the inside. So I would say shoulder in is going to help the canter more than haunches in, because the shoulder in is kind of a sister position for the canter itself, because we talked about how the canter is the only naturally bent gait that the horse has. The shoulder in aligns the appropriate balancing diagonal, where the haunches in changes that balancing diagonal. So if your horse is on the forehand, basically, if your horse is on the forehand, the hip will have a tendency to draw to the inside because they're balancing on the wrong diagonal legs. So to me, I don't think that I would, in most cases at least, I don't think that I would school too much haunches in at the canter as a way of strengthening the canter. Half pass now, and we'll get to that in a moment, half pass is going to help your canter more than haunches in will.
So in an exercise where the horse is asked to do haunches in down half the long side and shoulder in on the other half, how hard is this balance switch on a horse?
It depends on the horse's confidence with the balance switch. I wouldn't say that the balance switches are necessarily physically hard, but emotionally, the horse has to understand it. Cognitively, the horse has to understand it. And the rider has to prepare that. It's not a, okay, here we are on this diagonal, boom, here we are on this other diagonal. You can't do that. tempi changes, you can do it in that stride, right? But if we're going from haunches in to shoulder in, for me, that's going to be 3 or 4 good steps before we get from one to the next. Otherwise, we're going to be rushing pretty seriously to get that done. In the trot, it's a little easier because of the diagonalization. You can go within 1 to 2 strides from that change. In the walk, it's going to take you a couple more strides. And I would say specifically focus in the walk on that if you're just green to doing that combination there. Let it be, I want to think about, we go from, I think the question was haunches in to shoulder in. We want to go haunches in, the stride of haunches in, a stride of straight, and then a stride of shoulder in. But within that straight stride, now you have to change the balancing diagonal, right? So we're really thinking it's haunches in, outside hind to inside front, straight, and for that first stride of straight, it's still outside hind to inside front. The next step is a stride of inside hind to outside front, and then the next step is going to be the shoulder in. So technically, you would have 2 straight strides in there if we're thinking about following this line of thought to get that to happen. Otherwise, the horse is going to feel a bit overwhelmed. And the rider is going to feel rushed to get it to happen.
That's it for now.
That's it for now. Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about renvers or haunches out. If you've understood haunches in, going to be super easy because we're just going to change the position of the wall. Okay? Haunches in. The shoulders are guiding down the wall, or the track, or whatever track you're on. I'm talking about the wall all the time with this because I think it's easier for riders to see, especially if you're new at learning this. I think it's much easier to understand if we think of it from that perspective. When we go to haunches out, we don't need me on here anymore. When we go to haunches out, we're just changing where the wall is. And when we do that, so let's say you're tracking, you would have been tracking to the left, so the horse is balancing left hind to right front. Haunches out, the balance stays the same, but the bend changes, okay? Where we would be going from a left bend to a right bend in that case. If we're following the tracks, the shoulders are still guiding. So if you're riding on the outside track and you want to ask your horse to go with their haunches to the outside, you need to move the body over or inside one track before you can ask for that to happen. So there's an opportunity for a leg yield, I guess. You'd ask the horse to step over to the inside track, and then you'd change the bend to put the haunches to the outside. Still the same aids, in essence, when you're doing it this way. Your shoulders are guiding, and then your hips are helping to deviate. Okay. So again, haunches in, haunches out, or travers and renvers. The differentiation is what side the wall is on. Your aids aren't going to change unless we're going, left bend, left shoulder in, right, or left haunches in, right haunches in. But the way that we're talking about it right here, haunches in when you're tracking right is going to be feeling the same as haunches out when you're tracking to the left. I hope that's clear and understandable. Yeah. Any other questions popping up in there as a result of that?
Nope.
Nope. Pretty good. All right. Now we want to talk about half pass. Actually, I'm going to take one moment to refill my water. That'll... no, not take a peek. Just refill my water. David's heckling me in the background here. But I'm going to refill my water glass, and that'll give a chance if anybody's typing any questions for those to come in before we deviate and start talking about our half pass. All right, how was that for a weird moment where you're like staring at a blank screen? Where did he go?
Peaceful.
Peaceful. There we go. Yeah.
No more questions.
A moment of quiet. No more questions? Okay, great. So we're going to talk now about half pass. Okay. Actually, one part that I forgot to mention. So when we were talking about the leg yield and the shoulder in, we were talking about how those movements happen away from the bend. Haunches in happens into the bend. The movement happens into the bend. Okay. I'm just looking at my notes and seeing that I have that marked down there. Half pass also happens into the bend. Okay. So when we're talking half pass, there's different degrees of expectation in your half pass based on your horse's strength and understanding. Okay? When you're first introducing your half pass, ready for this? It's going to be pretty simple. When you're first introducing your half pass, I'll draw these balancing legs. And the tracks that they're on. We've got 3 tracks. You can see the shoulders are leading and the haunches have deviated from the track. That probably sounds, for most of you, like what we just talked about with the haunches in. Imagine if I were to draw the wall right here. We've got a haunches in across the diagonal. That's going to be how you're going to introduce your half pass. Okay? And for most of us, that's all you're going to need. Okay? For, I should say, for a lot of us at least, for the fitness of your horse. The half pass is really, what's the most challenging about the half pass is that you don't actually have the wall as your point of reference. So you've really got to have your control because you're coming across the diagonal, basically, or across a diagonal and guiding your horse across. As they get stronger and as we work more in the higher level, there becomes a bit more sideways in there. The more sideways we get, the more it becomes, I'll say the closer it comes to what we refer to as a full pass. Okay? Where the horse, did that wrong, sorry. The stronger your horse gets in the half pass, and the more control we get, the more availability of the movement of the legs. We could say suppleness. Articulation is really more what it's about. The more of that we get, the more we aim for a more straight sideways, okay? Which is what we refer to as a full pass. Now you would be doing this at walk, at trot, and at canter. Now, you almost never see full pass at the canter unless you're talking about bullfighting horses, okay? Or your really high-level working equitation horses. You'll see that in there. A canter straight sideways with a flexion into the direction of movement is really challenging. A question came up earlier about the side pass. Side pass, what we see oftentimes shown, side pass would be similar to full pass, except the horse generally is looking away from the direction of travel. Okay, so it's kind of like side pass, the horse looks where they've been. Full pass, the horse looks where they're going. And that's a way that I would talk about this being different from a leg yield also. In the leg yield, the horse looks where he's been. Flexion would be the other way. In the half pass, the horse looks where he's going. Okay, the difference is obviously, as you know now, with the balancing diagonal for the haunches in. The reason I talk about this is that we work for it, we aim for being able to go more straight sideways. If we think about in your higher level dressage test, your canter zigzag, if you're only going in your haunches in across a diagonal, you don't have enough room for your zigzag for the test there, right? We need more reach, more articulation of the legs, but we can't build that in too soon. That would be really overwhelming, really demanding for the horse. So that's something that we progressively develop as the horse increases in their ability to sit and carry the rider into that sideways movement. When we do this at the canter, okay, so somebody was talking about haunches in at the canter, I would do more the half pass at the canter than the haunches in, even though they're very similar. This half pass, because you're across the diagonal, because you're going without the fence, you've got to really be in control of the horse's shoulders. They can't use the wall as like emotional support or something to mentally lean on. They've got to really be striding and following your seat. So half pass is great for that. Leg yield in the canter is also really great for developing the canter. Now, some classical trainers would argue that there is no such thing as a leg yield in the canter, and they would talk about a plie in the canter. Technically, in the walk and the trot, in the leg yield, the legs cross. Same thing in the half pass. The legs will cross in the movement a little bit. In the canter, because of the way the horse's pelvis works, in the canter, there's a jumping to the side, but not a crossing of the legs. So this gives us more rotation of the pelvis when we're working in the canter than it does in the walk and the trot. But that's also, it's because of the footfall that slightly deviates that we could say that we have a plie, not a leg yield, even though it's essentially the same thing. And again, then the half pass is also, in a very similar idea. So leg yield, again, is going to be suppling and creating more jump. Half pass is going to be strengthening and creating more jump in the canter when we're talking. So the idea of the aids for the half pass, they're going to be exactly the same as your aids for your haunches in. It's going to be about your intention and where are you headed in the arena or in the field or on the trail or wherever. Your full pass, as you develop there, simply thinking it's less forward, more sideways intention. Less forward, more sideways intention as you go. So again, if you understood the aids of the haunches in, you have the aids of the half pass. Questions? Yeah.
So if a horse is struggling to pick up the correct lead one way, say left, because they're on the wrong diagonal pairs, would you use shoulder in to the left to help them learn the balance and get the correct lead?
I think that's a fantastic question. If the horse is struggling to pick up the correct lead because of the balance, would I use shoulder in? Yes. First, I would use leg yield, because leg yield really helps to establish the balancing diagonal. But your shoulder in is going to be helpful also. Okay, I'll oftentimes on a circle leg yield the circle more open and then ask for the canter. And specifically in those moments when we're talking about the horse in a loss of balance, I'm going to leg yield outward until they release the nose and kind of come down slightly in the neck, relaxing in the neck, down toward the inside rein. You'll feel that happen, and that's going to be the moment when the outside lumbar spine, when the low back is going to be its softest. And that's going to be the perfect opportunity for them to come through in that canter. Okay.
I have a horse that is very tight in his hamstrings. I'm working on backing in hand to help him. Is it helpful to do lateral work at this point, or is that too much to expect?
I think it can be helpful, and of course, when we're talking about tightness in the hamstrings, I would talk to your body worker, talk to your vet, that sort of thing. But working the lateral work when you've got tight hamstrings, I think is going to be really a good, beneficial idea. My reason for that is that tight hamstrings often come from a horse that's heavy on the forehand and kind of jabbing and stabbing, kind of like pushing downward. If we think about a racehorse on the track, they generally tend to have really tight hamstrings because they run like wedges, right? They run downhill, and those hind legs push and propel forward like a wedge, rather than like what we would see in our collected horses where the haunches sit and lift, right? So that's the gluteal muscle work versus the hamstring muscle work. So the rein back, as this person mentioned, is fantastic for softening and unlocking that, helping to coil the pelvis and build more of the gluteal muscles. And your lateral work is definitely going to help with that also. Yeah.
What is the point of doing a haunches out?
What's the point of doing a haunches out? Suppleness and control, primarily.
Why is it more important to establish the leg yield before the half pass?
Because the leg yield is going to supple, and if the horse's body is not supple, the movement in the half pass for most horses, I find, is going to cause a lot of emotional tension.
Is there
Great
strengthening benefit to the full pass at a walk?
I think there can definitely be strengthening benefit to the full pass at a walk, and that's when we'll see it primarily. The full pass, we'll see that in our working equitation, things like that. Yes, I think that's really great. And now, keep in mind also, we're not talking for a long length of time or a large number of strides when we're doing that. It might be, hey, here's a half pass, give me a step or two of more of a full pass, and then return to the half pass. That's going to check in and really get the horse minding that they're shifting in their weight and articulating through their legs.
What is the rein position in the half pass?
What's the rein position in the half pass? It's going to be just like in our haunches in. So if I'm half passing toward the camera on this horse here that's in right bend, my left rein is going to be at the shoulder or at the withers, not blocking though. We still need to be encouraging forward. So it's positioned, but it's not blocking. My outside rein is going to be steady, but if it deviates, its tendency is going to be to deviate to the outside. Okay, so connected, soft, ready to open to encourage the haunches to come through more. My shoulders are aiming for exactly where I want to go in that. My hips are deviating slightly toward the direction that I want the hips to go, which in this case is going to be forward around to the right. My inside leg is hanging underneath me. My outside leg is slightly back to support the haunches there, not to push, because if we push, then we're going to be leaning and contorting, right? So I'm staying stable above my horse, orienting my hips slightly to the right, which would be the inside for that. Shoulders aiming where I want to go, hips aiming where I want his hips to go, and otherwise, leg position has stayed the same.
During full and half pass, should legs not cross past center?
During half pass and full pass,
should legs not cross past center?
Should legs not cross past center? You're going to see, particularly in full pass, you're going to see the legs cross past center when the horse is really giving you availability in the legs. And so we want to be careful with that, and that's why I would definitely say do it for a moment, do it for a step. Don't do it for long term, and don't do it hardcore. You're always... I feel like the aim in all of the lateral work, in any of the collecting exercises, the aim is always to get that hind leg to step to the midline so that it can carry more weight and support the horse's body better.
I was once told by a knowledgeable clinician that side pass is a forward movement and the forehand will lead the hindquarters instead of being straight sideways to allow crossing of the legs. What would a horse's posture look like when doing a perfect side pass?
Okay, and I'm glad that question came up. So, side pass, because the horse is looking where he's been, we would say is technically a leg yield with less forward. That said, you could also ask for a side pass where the horse is looking into the direction of travel. That would be more considered a full pass. The idea with and they should all of these movements should be feeling forward. So when we're talking forward, it doesn't necessarily mean they're stepping forward, but their thought process is forward flowing. Okay, the leg yield keeps the same balancing diagonal as what the forward walk would have been, or what the circle would, whatever, as we're tracking at whatever gait, I guess, it keeps the same balancing diagonal. Oftentimes I describe it as the horse can kind of, this is going to sound wrong and I don't want it to sound wrong, but the horse can fall into the leg yield, where the horse has to drive into the full pass because of the change of balancing legs. It's not that we're asking our horses to fall in the leg yield. That's just kind of a picture in my mind. If you can see that, if I'm bending to the right, my right hind is stepping under, my left front is guiding, it's easy for me to kind of drift into the leg yield, versus I have to change that balancing diagonal and now drive into the full pass. Both have their place, both have their functions and their purposes. To me, it's going to just be depending on which one you want for what you're doing.
That's it for now.
That's it for now. All right. Well, gang, I want to thank you so much for tuning in for this, for catching this live. I don't even know how long we've been going here, but it's been a minute. It's been quite a few minutes. Again, to let you know how the rest of this is going to work, we're going to be having a Q&A on, what did we say, Tuesday, I believe it is, so that you'll have had a chance to process through the video. If you're catching it after the fact, you've got a chance to take notes, and we're going to have that Q&A based on just clarifying everything here in this video. If you have more questions, might be best to log them, save them, rather than bringing them up in this video. I'll do my best to try to check back in on this video and answer the questions that have been missed, or at least bring them to the Q&A. Best if you can catch the Q&A to be there live for that. We are going to do that through Zoom. I think there's been an overwhelming response that Zoom sounds great, so I'm all about that. We'll get it figured out how to do that. So that'll be this Tuesday coming at 6 p.m. also, just as we aimed for with this lecture here. And I apologize for being a couple minutes late to this one, but we're going to, once this finishes, I'm going to release the leg yield video module in the guide for leg yield. I'm going to post that link in there for you. It's a YouTube link, but it's a unlisted YouTube link, so please don't just go sharing it with everybody. Try to keep that within the group here. I felt like that was going to be the easiest way, YouTube was going to be the easiest way for us to get that available, so that we can just click and have it there. Because the video itself is just over 20 minutes of me working with one of my horses, also coaching Tyler with her horse, and then working that horse in hand as well. So you see the breakdown, and it's specifically focused on the leg yield. The Q&A that's coming up this Tuesday is going to cover all of these things, any kind of clarification that you need. But then next week's Q&A is going to be on the leg yield itself. So we're going to try to keep that, as much as we can, more specific to leg yield Q&A. We can bring in other things if we need to, but I want to try to keep it building individually for each module as we go. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. Hopefully this hasn't completely, overfilled your cup. Hopefully you've got a lot of great notes. And I'm going to be signing out here. Thank you guys so much. Don't be afraid also. You've got just over a week to play with the leg yield before we have the Q&A. This gives you a chance to work with your horse, to run into some hiccups and, oopses and things like that. And some successes, obviously, as well. Don't be afraid to post, some videos. Post a few minutes of you and your horse working on the leg yield. I'll probably try to choose a couple of those videos, if you get to posting any, and we can maybe discuss them during the Zoom Q&A. We can put a little bit of coaching coaching in there. I can't promise to be able to coach everybody's video on that, but it would be great if some of you get the chance to get some film there of you and your horse working on the leg yield, whether it's on the ground, whether it's under saddle, whether it's a horse that has been doing leg yield for 10 years or one that's just starting and maybe it's your first day asking. And I think that would be great as a group for everybody to be able to learn from everybody else also from that aspect. And that's something that we'll do for each of these movement modules as we go. So again, gang, thank you so much. For those of you that were able to catch this live and stick with me the whole time through this, I really appreciate it. And for those of you that are catching up afterwards, I look forward to any questions that you might have and look forward to catching up with everybody again on Tuesday for the next Q&A. Thanks so much, gang.